Hello out there, you interweebs. Welcome back to the reading room. And today in the reading room, it's Friday for me, maybe not you, but it is Friday for me. It's Friday morning, so it means Fundamentalist fails. There's plenty of failures to go around, quite frankly. But today I came across this guy, Alan Parr. Now, Alan Parr, I'm not even sure if he's a fundamentalist. I'll be honest with you. This might be absolute clickbait, and, it might be that he's not a fundamentalist at all, and I'm just sucking the wind. But I didn't mean to do that. I just thought it was interesting what he was saying. And he was going through it was really his title that was clickbaity that sort of got my attention, because it was like, I prove God exists, not just demonstrate some evidence, not just suggest, not just give a preponderance of that this is the case, but he proving Christianity in whatever minutes. I think it was 23 minutes or something. But not just proving Christianity. The title of it was Proving Christianity is the Only True Religion in 20 minutes or 23 minutes or something like that. So it's absolutely, the claim that's being made. I feel like I'm not sure that's the case. Watching it through, yeah, okay, so... Though it is funny. It is funny. I'm not even sure if he's a fundamentalist. I'll be quite honest with you. I don't even know what flavor of theist he actually. Well, obviously he's Christian, but I don't sort of know. I've never heard of him before. And he seems to be sort of a like a non sort of church sort of religion, a sort of, oh, well, I'm going to make my own ministry with blackjack and hookers kind of thing. But he does seem to be very, very, very sort of, I am absolutely, right kind of thing. So, yeah, he seems to be, he's obviously evangelical, but I don't know what sort of, whether he's fundamentalist or not. He does, run seminaries and things like that, but I don't really know. So, yeah, I do apologize if you've been fooled into thinking that he is a fundamentalist. If he's not, I haven't really looked up that much about him, but it was an interesting video. And I have been preparing for other stuff. I do have, well, I had a debate against Andrew Wilson coming up, which was interesting. So Andrew Wilson's being dodgy as fuck, in my opinion. So sorry to swear, but he's being so dodgy. He's sort of changed the date at least 4 times now. He agreed on this one coming up on Modern Day Debate. He said he can't make that either. It's just a sort of case of, now he wants to schedule it at 11 o'clock at night my time, and I haven't. Like, I saw that email this morning and I haven't responded to it yet. I want to decide whether I want to do a debate, a late night debate, as it were, with sort of the debate dissection the next day, my dissection, my debate review thing the next day. So I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. It's it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild, pretty unprofessional, pretty yeah. So I haven't decided. But if you want to if you want to give me some feedback for that, whether you would watch something at 11 p.m. Western time, that's 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Saturday, I believe. Let me know. Let me know if you would want to watch that or wouldn't. I really do. I really do care about making these lives available to my audience. That is a big deal to me, that people have the opportunity to join and enjoy the other people and things like that. So it kind of is slightly annoying that it's being all over the place. You'll be asleep. Fair call, Jay. Totally fair, mate. Absolutely fair. Hey, I've worked night shift. I used to work a shift in a bakehouse, doing packing up of stuff from what was it, 11 at night till 7 in the morning, the graveyard shift, as they called it. And that was, some people are fine working nights. some people will go crazy. I'd put it nicely. Some people cannot handle it. Like, they just can't. And you know, it depends on how much of a night owl you are, how well you're adapted. I totally understand that, Jay. Totally get it, mate. Yeah, and that's fair. Tilting women, I won't want Wilson no matter on. That's fair. Totally fair. I completely understand, mate. I absolutely understand. I'm not there to play into his stuff. I'm there to let people know about secular humanism and all the benefits it can provide. So yeah, I think it's more representing my side than sort of attacking his. But you know, yeah, I just think secular humanism hasn't been that well represented in the sort of debate sphere where I run. So I would like to at least present how it can be, you know, really cool, you know. Back to the fundamentalist fails. So we will be watching Alan Parr. I'm not familiar with Alan Parr. Like, if you haven't noticed, there's so many. Look, Tilting. Honestly, mate, I don't like. I get what you're saying. I generally don't worry that much about it and focus what I'm doing. I've run into Jim Bob. He's even worse. You know, I've run into people. They're even worse. I get what you're saying, but you know, if it's going to be this Saturday morning, I don't have a lot of time to prepare. So I have to decide whether I want to do that, whether I want to stay up late, because you know, it's going to be at least a couple of hours, which is 1 a.m. You know, if it was just an interview or something, I might stay up late to do it. I don't know about that one, you know, whether it's worth it for Wilson, but you know, but yeah, I didn't really come here to talk about him. I've come here to talk about Alan Parr and how little I know about him. So you might have noticed how little I know about these people. I don't go really searching out these people. I do look for content. I do have a block of my time to look for things, and I put them in a folder, basically, you know, things that I can possibly use for fundamentalist fails and things like that. Like, I really do. So I'm a lot of the times I'm like, oh, who is this person? I've never heard of them before. And you know, maybe that is a failure as a counter apologist. Maybe that is just me being me and being oblivious to everything going on around me. Maybe it is my own brain protecting itself from this stuff. But you know, I do really like you know, yeah, I don't think Jim Bob had a real good time against me, though. That's the thing. You know, Jim Bob encountered me, and you know, he really got stuck to it. You know, like I think that, in my opinion, Jim Bob's arguments were absolutely terrible, and I pointed that out. You know, like for instance, his thing of God's a special kind of agent, and you know, for all of his talk about knowing the laws of logic, when he's saying that God is an agent but not an agent, he's a special category of agent. That is a violation of the law of excluded middle. So he talks about the 3 laws of logic. He doesn't understand them, right? He does not understand them in the slightest, because he would understand that when you say any proposition, true, false, right? God is an agent. I am a human. I am a man, right? Any proposition you put out there is either true or false. It will not have a third category. There is no third category. And that answer may depend on how you evaluate what it is that you're looking at, right? But it will have 2 categories. And, you know, the fact that he didn't understand that is it's mind-melting, just mind-meltingly bad. Because he's sort of talking a big game about philosophy, does not understand the basics. Oh, paradoxes. Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. The lie is paradox, right? This statement is a lie. Beautiful. Yeah. So it's a paradox. Yeah. But paradoxes. So yeah. No, I got it. I got it, Jay. I got it. I hear you, buddy. Yeah. So I don't think that. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I get you. I think though that with conceptual things that don't exist, that's fine, right? That's actually fine. Like, so if you're saying, "Oh, I'm married bachelor," right? I don't think. Yeah, there probably is. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm just busting your balls, mate. Like, so I think with conceptual things and things that are sort of, abstracts, you can have paradoxes and things like that, but we're really talking about statements about reality, essentially statements about the real world. Your mind struggles with that paradox. Okay, well, I mean, you can just follow it through, Pinworm. It's basically that if you say this statement is a lie, then the thing has to be false, right? So you're saying this statement is false. But if this statement is a lie, you would put a not on it, right? So any false statement has a not value assigned to it. So basically, you're saying that it's a lie, and this statement is not a lie, right? So it will invert the value, basically. So the negation is true. Yeah, there's no closure. It's a paradox. And if the statement is then true, then the statement is a lie. The statement is true. The statement is a lie. That's the nature of paradoxes. But anyway, we're here to wow. Okay, the pizza sleeps swiftly under the west. Therefore, the much. Yeah. No worries. We haven't really started yet, Jessica, but it's fantastic to see you all here. And I will bring up the current fail champ. I have not actually brought him up yet, so I will grab that. And we will start on. And this is the man. This is Alan Parr, and he runs his own ministry. I'm sure he's got lots of things to sell. Got truth. Look, so the thing that I've noticed recently, and it's really been bugging me, is that theists seem to think that truth is this thing that's out there somewhere. I see more truth as a comparator, like it's a comparison. So when people say, "Oh, well, I've got the truth," they're simply saying, in a roundabout way, that the statement they have made is when compared to reality is accurate or somewhat accurate or highly accurate. I think that there's, because we can have the number of questions have been floating around my mind lately, sort of. So if you make a proposition, that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and you make the proposition, well, mitochondria is, and then you give a biological definition, is one more true than the other? I would say so, right? We have this thing of, well, that which is compared and is more accurate is more true. And I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I think that things are either true or not true. But then the question has to be asked of how similar do things have to be true. Like, you have this wiggle room in there. Like, politicians use it all the time when they say something that isn't false, but it isn't quite true either. Like, it isn't, they sort of misrepresent the truth. So I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, sort of what actually is the truth, because I think that a lot of people take the truth as when you're comparing something to reality, right? Matt Delahunty gives a definition of that which comports with reality, but I don't think that's necessarily true. You can sort of say, hey, and I'll get to it later, but sort of you can sort of say, hey, Super Mario is a plumber, right? And nothing of that is anything to do with reality. You're simply describing an abstraction. Yeah. Are Daffy and Donald a pair of ducks? Yeah, that's true. But what part of that is describing reality, I guess? Yeah. Christian apologists are all Platonists. Yeah. They seem to have an idea that the things that they call transcendence, like morality and the mind and consciousness, that they transcend the universe or some crap like that. I ran into somebody sort of saying, hey, all of these things are transcendent of the universe. It's sort of like, well, how? Like, how do you know that? How do you just, how do you demonstrate that, in fact, these things transcend ordinary empirical physicalism and somehow get out there into, whatever's beyond the universe? Like this whole supernatural thing is wild. I get you.
Let's say you're in a conversation with somebody, or somebody.
That would never happen. I will never be in a conversation. Sorry, I'm feeling a bit cheeky today. I just want to hassle the guy. Hassle. Yeah, I'll never be in a conversation with anybody. I don't have any social skills. Are you joking?
Comes up to you and says, hey, why is Christianity true? In other words, why is Christianity the only religion that can get you to God or get to heaven? How can you be a Christian who is so arrogant to think that your way is the only way?
Yeah, that's what all Christians think. That's what all of them think, which is wild because, obviously this is for Christians, but, I've said that before, and the answer's generally been because this this is what the book means, or I have the truth, the true way. And it's sort of like, well, that's not a demonstration that yours is the correct one. That's an assertion. It needs backing up. Alan Parr equals Mike Winger? I don't know. I'm not that familiar with Mike Winger either, I'll be honest with you, Pinworm. Is he someone I should look up? Is he? I think I've done something on him before. He's got a YouTube channel. Look. He's calling Trump a false prophet. He might not be too bad. Can fallen pastors be restored? What the hell? Okay. Should pastors be publicly exposed? Absolutely. The public has a vested interest in somebody that breaks the law. Come on now. Like, we don't, the law isn't carried out by God. Like, come on now. I don't know. Yeah, no, it does sound a bit like him. Yeah.
And all of these other religions are going straight to hell. What would you say? Well, in this video, I want to say.
Yeah, and they say the same of you. So we get into this interesting predicament where they're claiming that you're going to hell. You're claiming they're going to hell, or whatever punishment their religion has, right? Like whatever system of punishment for not believing that their system has. And so we get this weird failure from your point of view to understand that there is, without some kind of test or some kind of independent evaluation that we can categorize why yours is true. Because they will make unsubstantiated claims saying theirs is true. You'll make unsubstantiated claims saying yours is true. And to the outsider, neither one has any real substance over the other. Generally, when people are accepting Christianity in a society that aren't Christian, generally they're looking at their own criteria. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Generally, they'll be looking at it and going, does this significantly harm people? Is it manipulative? Is it cult-like? They generally won't be evaluating your Christianity on any kind of truth claim. because you refuse to back that up with any kind of demonstration that it is actually true. Generally, what they'll be doing in order to say, hey, this Christianity is acceptable or not acceptable, is evaluating how much, well, let's face it, damage it will do to the people around it. Some are pretty benign, some don't really cause any more harm than, any other religion does. Some of them, like, the Southern Baptists or, South Westboro Baptist Church or whatever, they're absolutely awful and cause all kinds of damage to the community around them. Not just damage by the stuff that they do, but also by splitting up the community. We have cults that we do not accept because of the sheer amount of damage that they do to the people in them, and their families, their extended friends, everybody around them. So, it's very hard to evaluate which one is true when you all refuse to provide, well, not refuse, you're unable to provide any real evidence for them, just stories and assertions. And it's very strange to me when I keep getting, I will encounter somebody and I will say, oh, well, this other religion makes the same claim. And they say, yes, but ours is true. And it's like, well, why should I believe that when they're saying the same thing? And they cannot wrap their heads around it. They cannot put themselves in the shoes of somebody that doesn't believe in either, trying to, evaluate them. They can't seem to understand that, which is wild to me.
Suggest to you that there are 4 questions that can helpfully guide you through a conversation with someone who is skeptical about Christianity. And if you can prove that the answer to these 4 questions is yes, then we must unequivocally conclude that Christianity is true, and by deduction, all other religions are essentially.
So if the answer is yes, I thought you said you were proving it today. So if these questions, why isn't the first question, is Christianity true? And if they answer yes, then you've proved Christianity. I don't, this seems really weird to me. It's sort of like, yeah, but what if they're no? That's not, like, it's not a proof if it doesn't prove anything, right? They cannot steel man unbelievers. Yeah, I know. Jedi, I do agree with that, mate. I think that they have a lot of trouble steel manning unbelievers. I must admit, I do have some trouble steel manning them at times as well. Like some arguments I do have trouble with. It's more, and I don't think it's steel man. I think you steel man arguments. You don't necessarily steel man people's sort of worldviews or belief systems or anything like that. I think that they just have trouble acknowledging the possibility of thinking that there is no God, like thinking like an atheist. So I think the sign of a good mind or a skeptical mind or a mind that can critically think is to be able to entertain other people's ideas without necessarily accepting them. Going, yeah, okay, I can put myself in your shoes. I can sort of say, hey, what is all of this about? And sort of put yourself in their mindset without actually accepting that as truth. As, I can say, hey, if I was a, UFO believer, this would scare me and this would, be very suspicious and all of this stuff. I can definitely do that, but that doesn't mean I accept it. It seems to me that a lot of theists have problems putting themselves in a non-believing mindset. And I think perhaps that's because they are trained not to have any doubts whatsoever, not to entertain any kind of different opinion, because it degrades their current stance. They have to believe it's true wholeheartedly, and that is, believe it's true with all their heart kind of thing. That is what they do, and they've been trained to do from birth. So I think that's a problem, because when we start to not entertain other people's ideas, I think we do ourselves a disservice. We sort of go, well, we don't don't understand them. They're horrible. They're other. And we really have to understand where they're coming from in order to, especially with debate, you have to understand where someone's coming from in order to put across ideas and things, like in order to convince them. But that doesn't mean you have to accept those ideas. But I think that the problem for the churches is that they will stamp out any kind of, thinking that is outside of that box. Yes, I have noticed that, Jedi. That is incredibly messed up. That is so messed up. I incredibly messed up. We're talking about a basic human social behavior is empathy, right? That's a basic human social behavior. We know that people that do not have empathy, either through sociopathy or psychopathy, they're and they get a bad rap. People can be completely fine and live very productive lives, but they're definitely missing something of the human experience, and it's rough. It's rough. I feel sorry for them. And if you do have psychopathy out there, yeah, I feel for you. I don't think it's this amazing thing, or that you're a horrible person necessarily. I think people aren't good or bad necessarily. I think that the things they do are good and bad, and the people are just people. But I think that you can live productive. But the reason why I say that is because you see React videos and you see these people reacting to stuff, and you see these emotions that they display, the incredible happiness, and you resonate with that touches you, even though you may see something where people are overjoyed at something happening and you're just happy for them, kind of thing. You're happy because they're happy. And without some kind of treatment, they will never get to experience that, and that's sad to me. And it also sucks, because when people are sad, you can be sad, but even that's good in a way. You can cry at a movie, even though it's not even real, just because of the emotion being displayed. And there is help for people. There is medication we can try to help with, therapies we can try to do for sociopathy. Psychopathy, not so much. That's more neurological. But all of these people get a real map. That is the mirror neuron. Yes, correct. So basically, it is your neurons firing in mirroring what somebody else is doing. It's really remarkable what happens, that when they express an emotion, your mirror neurons start to mirror it. And it was once suggested to me that autistic people, or people on the autism spectrum like myself, don't have a lot of empathy, and that's not true. It can actually come across that way to neurotypical people because we're bad at picking up on social cues, right? Like, so someone might be upset or incredibly happy, and we don't notice. And that's not the same as not being empathic. It basically means that we... because they've done double empathy studies where neurologically diverse people, autistic people, can actually do it between themselves, and so can neurotypical people, but it doesn't cross very well. It crosses less well. So it's not that we don't have empathy, it's just that communication is kind of a little bit broken, and that we have trouble seeing it. Once we understand it, we're really very, very empathic people once we understand it. So though that neuron is working, it is the picking up on neurotypical behavior as opposed to neurodiverse behavior is the problem that we have. So which is wild, which is really wild. And so I think that the study that I read, so there was a study, it was called the double empathy problem. It recommended that it's not just the case where neurologically diverse people have to work on understanding how neurotypical people express themselves, which is true. That is something that I've definitely worked on. I can pick it up. I have to analyze a lot. So if I'm tired, I miss much more things. So because it is an analysis, it's not just a intuitive thing. But they also said, well, the neurotypical people have to work on understanding the neurologically diverse people as well, because they can communicate that information just fine as well between themselves. So it really goes both ways. And I think that was very prescient. And the thing that they actually found was that the neurologically diverse people would actually communicate better between themselves. So they actually understood a lot more about the other person through, if they were autistic or on the autism spectrum, than to neurotypical people, which was interesting. But, it sort of, yeah. Well, Jessica, you might be checked for autism spectrum. I do notice social cues, but it's because I am analyzing all the time. I think that sort of people on the spectrum, they come with all of these behaviors to compensate for what they're doing, and that's why I like to. I like to focus on people. I will try, like, I'll be very, very interested in what they're doing and all of the things, but it's more a cognitive analysis than it is a intuitive thing. And that's the big difference. And when I get tired, I just have no clue what they're thinking anymore, because Oh, that's good. It's a superpower with some downsides, Jessica. It's some supersides. Hey, ambushed apostate. Good to see you. Good to see you.
False. Okay, before we jump in, I've got a free online course for.
Oh, of course you do. Buy my DVDs. Oh, I also haven't. I do know today is Good Friday. It is Easter today, and I haven't even thought about doing a Easter stream. I usually celebrate Christmas and Easter, or my birthday sometimes, with doing just a funny stream dressed up as Hovend, because I find it hilarious. I don't know if you want to see that. Right. And this is something that I can talk about this for ages. I can talk about this for absolutely ages. Yes, YouTube chats are difficult. You can still, people have absolutely trolled me in YouTube chats, because I don't get the thing. I'm a sucker for it. And when I used to work on the phones, right, like, so a lot of my life I've been doing phone work. And I'll probably apostate sisters, I'm going on theirs in about a week. It'll probably talk a lot more about my life if you want to see it. If not, totally cool. But I used to talk about tone, inflection, pauses, all of this different stuff about how people are talking, right? Like, I would, people would be like, oh, how did you know they were fill in the blank? And I'm like, well, their tone was slightly higher pitched, and I would be doing this stuff. And they'll be like, I never even thought about that kind of thing. And it's like, really? You never thought about the way that their tone, changes from this section to the, and sort of, I'd point that stuff out, and people would be like, what are you doing? Like, what? But this is a compensation for me not intuitively getting how people are coming across, doing phone work, having to adapt, and using whatever method I have at my disposal to try and understand where they are. So a lot of it is very cerebral. A lot of it's very analytical, because I don't have that intuitive, well, I understand where they're coming from. So yeah, and in YouTube chats, often I've mistaken sarcasm for real things and stuff like that. You're always down for ripping and hoving? Yeah, well, I mean, people seem to like my my Ho Ho Hoven stream, which was the Christmas stream. What did I play last time? I usually just play a game. Oh, I played Jesus Simulator or something. It actually crashed halfway through, and then it was demonetized for having illegal music in it, like copyright music in it, which is hilarious for a game. I found it just hilarious. 1900, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. It is the wig. It's all the wig. I'm not a funny person. It's all the wig. It's all the wig.
Out that in the description box below. Okay, with that out of the way, let's jump in. Question number 1. This is the first question that you
I'm
must
ready.
get people.
My body is ready. Bring it on.
To agree to, and that is the idea: does truth exist?
What do you mean by exist? What do you mean by exist? So it's a difficult question. It's like asking, does math exist? Well, yes, obviously it exists, right? Obviously math exists, but is it real is a better question. Is it a real thing in the real world? Well, no, obviously not. You can't show me a 2 or show me a 4. And this is where their idea of transcendence comes from, this idea that, well, it's not real in the real world, but truth is real. I don't think it is. I think it is oh, fantastic, Tori. Always good to see you. Always good to see you. Small truth does exist, or big T or absolute truth does not exist? Yeah, I think so. Yes. I think that as well. So when it comes to things like truth, it's more a comparison of a proposition or something that you say or something that is inferred with something else. And that might be reality itself, right? So if I say, I'm talking into a microphone, that is true because the proposition matches significantly to the reality of what's happening. I could say, hey, I have an audience, and that is true because the proposition matches. But I could also say, Superman comes from Krypton, right? That is true, even though Superman and Krypton do not exist, right? They don't exist. So I don't think truth statements are necessarily relative. They can be, but what I would say is they're highly contextual. And what I mean by that is that truth statements only exist as a comparator to the referent, to whatever you're referring to, right? Like, so they may describe reality, they may describe something else, but there's a metaphysical state of the comparator being similar enough to the referent, basically on a basis of similarity. And like I said, I've been thinking about how similar does it have to be the truth? Do things have a spectrum of truth? Are some things more true than others? We might say some propositions are more accurate than others, right? I may say I am Caucasian, right? Like that's a true statement. I might say that I have an ancestry of Irish, Scottish, English, all of these different ancestors. Is that more true? I mean, is there a sort of graduality of truth? Definitely that's more accurate. So is it more true? I'm not even sure that is a meaningful statement. Things are either true or they're false. I don't think you have more true. However, there are statements that politicians make that in certain contexts are true, but out of context they're not. So I think truth is entirely context dependent. It really does depend on what you're describing and whether that is an abstraction or whether it is something in reality. So I think that truth just isn't something that really exists. I think it is just a comparison with other things. And the thing that anchors truth as a metaphysically real thing is the referent. If that's in the real world, then that truth is describing something real, and therefore the comparator is kind of a real thing. But that doesn't mean that the truth actually is out there on some, sort of transcendental level. It's just a comparator. there's a social construct that exists inside human minds, which means without humans, there'll be no such thing as truth. Well, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from, Jessica. I think that, without us to say this is true or that's true, I think, yeah, it just, the universe just is at that point. We don't have, for a start, nothing is a referent because we're not referring to anything. And what is a truth statement? I think we've got to separate truth from reality, where truth is what we're referring to, even if that's in reality, while reality just is, like it's not, reality isn't true in a sense. Like it isn't that reality is true. It just is. That's ontologically true. And that's a really weird way to say it. Yeah, so, but I don't think the truth is this thing that exists separate of human minds as well. I think that we just compare things and say, hey, but, we're talking about words that can have many different meanings. And I think that, it's really, when someone's talking about truth, it really depends on what definition they're using and what context they're using it in.
Now, you have to start by asking this question: do you believe that there is such a thing as truth? Now,
do I think there's such a thing as truth? Well, obviously there's such. The question is whether truth is a real thing, right? Because when Christians talk about truth, they talk about it like it's a thing. It's a transcendental thing that is part of God, or God is truth, or, it has this extra dimensionality about it. And I don't think that's the case. I simply think it is when a proposition makes a comparison with a referent, with whatever you're referring to, and it matches. And that, because we describe reality so often with that, I think that is, true as far as reality is concerned. So when I say, hey, it's true that I'm doing a show, then that is true because it matches reality. But that needn't be the case. I can say, my favorite thing is my favorite thing is robot fighting, right? That's my favorite sport. That is true, but that doesn't have to be the case for all people.
Oh, you have to start here, because if this person doesn't agree that there is such a thing as absolute truth, then essentially...
Wait. Where did the absolute come from? Where did the absolute come from? Okay, do you notice that? Do you notice he slipped the absolute in there? That's a different thing altogether. Absolute truth means something that is unchanging and is true for all people at all times, right? That's absolute truth. So the difference between truth and absolute truth is truth can be relative, right? So truth can be relative to you and somebody else. Absolute truth is true no matter what the state of being of anything at all. It is the truth no matter what. And that's not necessarily the case. In fact, for most statements of truth, that's not the case. So, and that's different. Let me give you a sort of example, right? You have objective truth, right? Which is basically, so basically that says, okay, it's not stance dependent, right? That if I say I am doing a show, that is objectively true. It doesn't matter your stance on my show, whether it's good or bad, and, feel free to dislike, etc. It doesn't matter about that stuff. It doesn't matter that you may like or dislike my show, or you think that I'm in the kitchen, or you think that my show's next week and you've absolutely missed me. How dare you? Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm joking. Do whatever you want. But like, that's objectively true that I'm doing a show, right? That's objectively true. As opposed to maybe subjective truths, which could say, the sky is beautiful or something that's subjectively true. It's true for me kind of thing. But that's different to absolute truth. I am doing a show is not absolutely true because in a few hours I won't be, right? That will be a false statement. Okay. So that's not absolutely true. It is objectively true, but not absolutely true, because absolute truths are true for all things at all times, right? There's a big misunderstanding between what objective is and what absolutely is. Things that might be absolutely true are perhaps the laws of physics, for instance. Like they're true at all times for all things, right? Like this is the thing we've got to understand, that absolute truths never ever change. And we don't know that physics is absolutely true. We don't know enough about quantum. We don't know enough about before the Big Bang, or even if before is a term we can use to the Big Bang where space-time started. There's no before if space-time started there. So we don't know a lot about these things and these absolutes that you're talking about. And might I remind you, only a Sith deals in absolutes. Alan Parr, Sith, confirmed. Three things are absolute: death, taxes, and absolute vodka. Yeah, well, I wish taxes were absolute, but they don't seem to be, do they now, Team OMB? It's good to see you, by the way. Hey, DeFreak, good to see you. So it's important to understand the difference between objective and absolute. Absolute is a really strong claim. Like you can claim like objective morality kind of thing. Okay, fine, right? You claim objective morality. When you're claiming absolute morality, you really are making a much higher order claim. You're claiming that morality never changes, is eternally present at the same state it is at all times for all people, no matter what. And that is a bold claim. That is a very bold claim. Well, Tenebris, he's not doing it on here. So if the freak knows where I stand with that kind of stuff. So, yeah, please don't. I haven't seen that. If you do, I think that's ridiculous. And please, just settle down over there. Just settle down. Absolute vodka. You know what? From my mind, Absolute was kind of middle of the road as far as I remember, Tori. Like kind of middle of the road stuff. That I don't really drink anymore. From my earlier days, I kind of remember it was just meh, average. I wouldn't say pretty good. But then again, I wasn't much of a vodka guy, I must admit. I did prefer things like tequila and stuff. So Absolute literally means unconditioned. Yeah, yep, fair call. Yeah, I didn't know that, but yes, that's my understanding of it. Yes, there's no conditions. It applies under any conditions whatsoever, which is fine. I'm missing out on chat while I work on some images. I don't know, Andrew, but I'm glad you work on images. I love your art. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So yeah, I encourage you. That is really awesome. So yeah, but I get this a lot. They will talk about things and then slip this absolute in there. Do you believe in truth? No. So you don't believe in absolute truth. Wait, where did the absolute come from? Right. Do you believe in truth? Well, yeah, truth is a thing. So absolute truth. No, where did the absolute come from? Lots of people, and keep your eyes and ears open for this, they will try and slip in this absolute with no clarification beforehand. As you will agree to something and then they'll say you have agreed to the absolute version of it. And that is not the case. Like I said, the closest I could think of to something that is absolute truth would be the laws of nature or the laws of physics. So, yeah. Okay. No. We are not getting into that. You are not drumming up an argument. Stop. Please stop. Like, seriously. Please stop.
Actually, having conversations about anything, whether it's science, whether it's God, whether it's religion, is basically a waste of your time. So if they say, well, I believe that some things are true for some people, but they're not true for others, right? That's the whole, it's true for you, but it may not be true for me or whatever. So this is the...
So we're getting confused between absolute and objective. If I say I'm doing a show right now, that isn't true for you or true for me and not true for you, or whatever he's trying to make out here. That's not the case, right? It is objectively true that I am doing a show. But truth, as I said, is context dependent, right? If I say something like, it is daytime, right? That is true for me. That is 100% true for me, but it's not true for you, right? And it's objectively true for me, but it's not objectively true for you. It's not even true for you. It's objectively false for you. So what I mean by truth is context dependent is that it really does matter what the referent is. And a lot of that is subtext. A lot of that is implied. For instance, when I say it is raining as a proposition, or it is daytime as a proposition, really that proposition comes with the implication that it's where I am at this time, right? Like currently on my time where I am, it is raining, but it's not been stated like that. So a lot of it is that implied context. So we say, that is true. I would say that is true. And you might say, well, the proposition, it is raining, that is false because you aren't where I am and you aren't at the time that I am, basically, or one or the other. So a lot of it is implied and a lot of it is contextual. That's an absolutely true statement. It might be a true statement if I phrase it as it is raining in Western Australia, or it is daytime in Western Australia. That is true for all of us now. That is objectively true. So a lot of it does depend on how it's phrased in the context that it's put in and the implied parameters to that statement. Like I said, I can say Superman comes from Krypton, and that's a true statement, even though neither actually exist. That is a true statement because the context is within the confines of that story. Like, does the abstraction Superman come from the abstraction Krypton? Yes, in the story it does. So both drop it. Both drop it. Tenebris, drop it, and you drop it. Next one to bring it up will get a little timeout to think about what you've done and how to treat other people. There you go. Enjoy. Don't test my my clicky fingers today. Superman comes from Cleveland. Yeah, obviously a false statement, even though Superman doesn't exist. Cleveland does, though. So there is sort of a metaphysical thing to, well, if you're referring to something real, there's a metaphysical property. You're referring to foundations of real things.
The starting point of the conversation. So you need to help them understand the difference between relative truth and absolute truth.
No, that there's another category in there, and that's objective truth. Like absolute truth is in all conditions at all times to all people. And that is not something that I see a lot of. It's not. Like I said, the laws of the universe seem to be the closest I could give out to absolute truth, but I don't know for sure that it's absolute. I don't know that for sure.
You need to help them understand that, yes, there are some things that can be true.
Oh, there you go. Original Superman comic artist created him in Cleveland, though. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's a fair comment. So, yeah, like contextual. What does Superman come from Cleveland actually, contextual sort of thing? Well, Tenebris, just don't accuse people of stuff if you don't have the evidence to back it. If you have the evidence, send it to me and I will review it. If you don't have the evidence, maybe just hold off. No problems with the mouse today? I don't know. I think the mouse wheel is giving out and it's making me sad. So Yeah, it really is contextual of what people mean when they say that, right? Like, so if you're giving the proposition, hey, Superman comes from Cleveland, someone might go, no, he's not, he's from Krypton. But the contextual is where does the where does the conception of Superman come from, right? That's really what you're implying by sort of giving that statement. But that's not completely evident when you're talking to somebody. So you may have to clarify what you mean. Do you mean where does the character come from in the story, or do you mean where was the character created? You have to, and that's a problem, because it's, one's objectively true and the other one's subjective.
For you, for instance, the best cars in the world are foreign cars. That might be your opinion. That might be true for you, but it might not be true for me. Or
yeah, that's sort of that subjective truth that I was talking about. But that doesn't mean that everything is absolute truth, right? As opposed to everything that's not your opinion is absolute truth. That's not the case, right? Things are relative and objectively true. It's not just your opinion. It is in fact true, but it is still sort of relative.
let me give you another one. The best flavor of ice cream is chocolate. Okay, yes, that might be true for you, but it's not true for me. So yes, those things are subjective.
Yes, but the fact that, like, if I say I'm doing a show right now, that is objectively true for both of us and everybody in the universe. It is a true statement, objectively true, but it's not absolute, right? It is not true for all people at all times. That it is relative to when I am doing my show. It still depends on me actually doing the show, and is not true at all times. It isn't. Reed's belief that morality is subjective is subjective. What? No. That's I think objectively that's true. I think you've subjective is just a stance-dependent condition. I don't think it's stance-dependent. I think that it's subjective is an objective truth. That's a weird thing to say. Why is it subjective? Why is it stance-dependent? I mean, ontologically, morality is either objective or subjective, correct? It's not dependent on my stance.
But you need to make them understand that while there is such a thing as subjective truth, there is also such a thing as absolute truth.
Morality is objectively, subjectively true. Yes, the ontology of morality is that it's subjective, in my opinion. I see no reason to think it's objective, so yes. So morality itself is objective, but the things that morality pronounces, that what you decide as far as metaethics is concerned, is subjective. Yes. So you're sort of talking about the state of morality, the state of affairs of morality, versus the moral pronouncements or moral judgments that you're making. I don't think that the moral judgments are objective. I don't think they are.
That is true for all people at all times, no matter what your opinion about it is. Let me give you an example. The earth revolves around the sun. That's not just true for you. That's true for everybody, right? Water freezes at 32 degrees.
Yes, but that's not an absolute truth, because if we go to billions and billions and billions of years in the future, the sun will swallow the the sun will swallow the earth, and that will not be true any longer. That will not be true any longer. So that's the difference. It's objectively true. I agree. It's absolutely true. No, it's going to change.
true for everybody. 2 + 2 = 4. That's not just true for me or true for you. That's truth. Fire will burn you if you touch it. If you don't believe that's true, go try to touch some fire, and you'll see very clearly that that's true for everybody.
No, that's not. I've run my hands through a candle flame at times, and it hasn't burnt me or hurt me at all. So that is really depends on how long you are putting your hand in fire. Okay, so yeah, if you want to debate, set up a debate. If you want to, I'm here to do a show. It's not here to debate. So if you want to debate, send me an email. I'm happy to. I'm happy to debate. I'm more than happy to.
Humans need oxygen to live. A triangle has 3
Humans need oxygen to live. Yeah, that is true.
sides. You get my point, right? There is no such thing as what is true for you.
Well, I mean, sort of geometrically speaking, that might be a truth. Yes, I get you. I understand that triangles have 3 sides, but I don't think there's anything like a triangle as far as a geometric shape is concerned. We don't really have any real triangles, right? So it's like a perfect circle doesn't exist, right? It's an abstraction. It doesn't actually exist. A perfect circle is too hard. Like when you go down to the atomic level, it will vary, and just like a triangle, it will have dips and imperfections that will cause it to not be a perfect triangle. So yeah, I get what he's saying, but some of these universal truths are really talking about abstractions like the perfect triangle, as opposed to, as a sort of description of triangular things in reality, that if you go down to an atomic level, it sort of will vary, and it won't have 3 sides. It will have all kinds of things. So I think that sort of absolute truths, when talking about abstractions, isn't really sort of saying, hey, they're absolute, because they don't filter into reality.
And it's not true for me. There are some things that are absolutely true. So at this point, you can conclude that there is such a thing as absolute truth.
Yeah, I don't think you've described absolute truth. I think you've described objectively true. I don't think those things are true for all people at all times. Just like I say, well, it is daytime now. That is not an absolute truth. It's just objectively true. It's not dependent on my stance, but it is dependent on where you are in the world. The statement "it is daytime" doesn't apply to the other side of the world at the moment, because it is objectively true that it is daytime when I say it. Yes, it is true. But it may not be true for you. It's still objective. It's not absolute.
Truth to which any rationally minded person would agree, and you can move on to the next and more important question.
Any rationally minded person agree. Yeah, I've just told you why you're conflating objective with absolute, and not understanding that things can be objectively true, but not for all people at all times. There is that possibility, and you've just conflated the two. Really, what he's trying to do is just smuggle in absolute there with no sort of, basis whatsoever. I'm not saying there's no absolute truths. I think there is objective truths, lots of them. But as I said, when we're talking about truth and we're making comparisons from a proposition to reality or whatever, it's really highly contextual, and it requires certain implicit things to be considered.
And that is the idea: does God exist? So now that we agree that truth exists, we have to move down to the next question: do you believe that God exists? Now,
No. In fact, I'll go you one further. I believe a God does not exist. I get the feeling this is, sort of aimed at Christians, or aimed at people that already believe in something. I think God obviously exists as a concept. It exists as a concept. I don't think it exists as a thing itself. I think there's also some problems there with, sort of saying, yeah, I don't know. It's a very weird thing to say. Does God exist? No, God exists. Does the concept, I mean, at a recent debate, I got somebody claiming victory because they said the concept of God exists, therefore a God exists. It's just not a real one. Well, congratulations, I guess. The concept exists. Fantastic. You've gotten that much out of me. But also the concept of Big Bird exists as well. But, where is that going to get you? When we're talking about when things exist, there's sort of two levels to it. There's the concrete and the abstract. Like, so we can say that the law exists, right? Like the law, the law, like legislature makes the bills that passes and becomes laws. Laws exist, but there's nothing real about them. They're just stuff that we made up, right? That nobody claims that laws exist on some transcendental level where they're overarching and controlling. Nobody says that because we made them up, but they sure exist. So they exist conceptually. And that's the big deal. Lots of things exist conceptually. Superman exists. There is a concept of Superman. But the bigger question for me is God real? And that one is no. No, it doesn't exist, like not in the real world. So when we're talking about existence, we're really again, it's like truth. It's context dependent. And a lot of that context is implied because our language is insufficient to cover all eventualities. America, the United States of America exists, but it's all conceptual. There's nothing saying that the United States with this flag has to be this way. It's objectively real. It's just subjectively agreed upon. And this is what a social construct is. It's an agreed upon subjective framework that a lot of people agree on, and therefore it kind of exists as a concept. There's nothing saying that the United States of America has to have these borders or has to have this flag and, is the home of all this liberty and has a constitution. That is just agreed upon. There's nothing, if you take away stances, if you take away minds, there's no United States of America. It is entirely stance dependent. Like if there's a, wild dictator that doesn't recognize the United States of America, it's not like, it suddenly exists for real. Now the land exists and the people exist. They're real. The people are real. The land is real. Certain things are real, but the country doesn't exist. It is a social construct agreed upon by people, and that's okay. But we still say it exists. So it's really important to understand the context here. That when you say, does God exist? No. Because I'm taking the implication that God exists for real. It's not just a social construct, that a whole bunch of people didn't just get together and say, well, we believe in this thing, so we're all going to believe that it is real, because that's a social construct. Just like a whole bunch of people got together and said, we have a agreement that United States of America is this country and founded upon, et cetera, and we all agree that it's a thing, it exists. Right, so that's the difference. So it's just, God doesn't exist. He doesn't exist in the real world. He exists as a social construct. A lot of people agree that he's a thing, but, that must be same for every religion that you don't believe in. Doesn't make him more real.
If the person says yes, then you can skip past this and you can move on to question number 3, which we'll get to a little bit later, right? But if they say, I'm not sure if God exists, or they say they don't believe God exists, so we need to make sure we have some arguments in place, some talking points. So now, even though we have never seen God, the beautiful thing about God is that he has given us enough evidence of his existence. And let me...
Really? He's given enough evidence of existence? Really? I don't think he has. For an all-powerful creator of the universe, it would be trivial to prove to everybody without any shred of doubt that he exists. It would be trivial. Like, we're talking about the all-powerful creator of the universe, and he can muster up about as much evidence as a guy telling his friends that he really does have a girlfriend, but she lives in another country. Like, that's the level of evidence he can muster up. Terrible. I see no reason to believe that that is the case. But, what amazing evidence do you have?
The three primary arguments that you can use in this discussion. Now, when you're talking to somebody, you may not necessarily need to use these phrases because that might intimidate them. All right, you don't need to use cosmological argument, moral argument, teleological argument, all that stuff. You don't need to use all that. Just explain the concepts to them. So let's start with the first one.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I should probably do a lot less than that, referring to philosophical concepts and rather just explaining them. It is kind of hard, though. It is kind of hard to do that because there's sort of a problem with people can throw out irrational things, and it takes a lot harder to explain why they're irrational than they throw them out. It's all like that Bernalini's law kind of thing.
The cosmological argument. And basically, all three of these have three statements, or three, I put four, three statements that you can basically agree to. So first statement of the cosmological argument.
Oh, we lost one somewhere. It was four, and then we lost one. Oh, dear. How's my girlfriend? She's in Australia. This kind of, oh, yeah, she's fantastic. Like, wow. I'm sure she's a supermodel, right?
Argument is everything that had a beginning has a cause.
Okay, so I've said this multiple times that it depends on what you mean by beginning. Like, so, like if you're building a ship, for instance, and I'm gonna sort of compare this with the ship of Theseus. When does that ship begin? Does that ship begin when you complete it in total, when it takes its first trip on the ocean? Well, what happens if you forgot the anchor? Right? And you have to go back and put the anchor on. Was it not a ship at that point? So things don't really begin. They more just change state, right? So the wood changes state into planks. Those planks change state and are nailed down to make the ship. Things are put together. Nothing really begins. We just assign sort of a conceptual beginning to it. So I don't think that sort of everything that begins has a cause or multiple causes. Why can't it be multiple causes? It needn't be just one cause. I kind of do agree with this, that there is a causal relationship between things and previous states. Yes, everything is causal. So everything that sort of changes state has a cause for it. So I don't necessarily disagree with him. But at the same time, begin to exist is kind of a bit meh.
So anything that you see that has a beginning, it doesn't matter. We could all agree that something must have caused that beginning. Things don't come into existence by themselves.
Well, nothing really comes into existence from nothing. It more is that, yeah, and I get what he's saying, though. I do agree with what he's saying, that changes of state do require causes. I get that, yes, that there is a cause for a change in state or something, something that begins to exist, has a cause. Okay, gotcha.
Right? If something comes into existence, it must have a reason or a cause for its existence. Things don't just pop into existence out of nothing. Any rationally minded.
Well, apparently they do. But you say that God is the cause. Okay. What caused God? But then that's where you hide behind it didn't begin to exist. Okay. And how do you know the cause for everything was God? Why couldn't it be something else? Why couldn't it be magic? Why couldn't it be, a all-powerful stone that just creates universes?
Minded person would agree with that, right? So the second statement is the universe had a beginning, right?
We don't know that. We don't know that. The universe had a beginning. No, we don't know that. All we can do is look back to the Big Bang. Now, it's important to note that the Big Bang is not is not the beginning of the universe. It is the beginning of the inflationary period of the universe. So we don't know that the universe had a beginning. And when you're saying things like, what was before the Big Bang? Well, if the Big Bang was the start of space-time, and there is no just time, it's space-time, they are intrinsically linked. They are four-dimensional. Einstein had a concept of a box universe, or a boxed universe, I think it was, that sort of, we think of things as three dimensions with time sort of anchoring it and running through it. But he sort of saw it as a four-dimensional universe, but space and time, they're all intrinsically linked. So before space-time is a nonsensical statement, because without time, there's no before. So you can't have a before space-time. You might say that the universe may have been, and I don't know this for sure, but it may have been in an atemporal state. Now, that's different than eternal, right? Like when you say eternal, that applies throughout all time, right? Throughout all time. But we know that that is a problem, because if we have no time, something can't be eternally running. And this idea that time is this constant set thing that is always operate, that's incorrect. A theory of time is incorrect. We've proved that. B theory is correct, that everything is happening simultaneously in four dimensions. That is the correct evaluation of it. So, and time is relative. It just is. Time is relative. Einstein proved that. It is true. The problem comes that if you're saying what was before time, there is no before. So in an atemporal state, it's like it's instant and happens forever at the same time. It's kind of like, you've got to think about what there would be if there's no time. Well, that wouldn't last forever, because there's no time to pass to become forever. It is instant and always was. So when you're looking at an atemporal state, it's wrong to call it eternal. It's better to call it atemporal. But if that is the case, then the universe may never have had a beginning. It was in a quantum plasma state with no space, no time, no energy, in an atemporal state, and then it collapsed into singularity. But we can't tell for sure. This is a hypothesis, not theory, right? So we don't know for sure. It may have had a beginning. We don't know. But people that think the Big Bang is the beginning, no, incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. It's the beginning of the inflationary period. It could be the beginning. We don't know. That's the problem. So the thing about the universe had a beginning, I don't think that's accurate. It may have been atemporal. So it may have been in that state forever. But there's no forever, because there is no time. So it is just a timeless state. So yeah, I don't think that is accurate.
Right. So this is not, once again, that's why you have to start with the truth element, right? So this is not something that's true for some and true for no. Even secular non-Christian scientists agree, looking at how the universe has been expanding. If it's been expanding, you can deduce that at some point it had a beginning.
No. They're saying it went to a singularity, right? So it went to one point in space. That's what they're saying. And it's expanding the same rate all around, and space is expanding everywhere. But they're not saying that was the beginning of everything in the universe. They're just saying that was the beginning of the inflationary period. Our physics at that presumed singularity, our physics kind of break down. We don't know. We can go up to 1 Planck second before the presumed start of that inflationary period. And then our physics just breaks down. We cannot tell what is beyond it. And that's very, very close to what we say maybe is the beginning. But the fact that we can't get there doesn't tell you whether it had a beginning or not. There is a theorem, the Borden-Guth-Vilenkum theory, is it the BGV? Guth-Vilenkin theory. Yeah, Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theory. It sort of says that it cannot have been infinite in the past, but it has to have a past space-time boundary. I think it was Guth himself that came out and sort of said, no, that theory does not say that the universe had a beginning. It says that the beginning of the inflation period, there must have been a border there, a space-time boundary. So, oh, there's Raiders. Oh, who's the Raiders? Welcome, Raiders. I don't see the raid message. Is YouTube lying to me? They're lying to you. Oh, in time. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope Nick is well. Nick's one of my favorite people. Awesome dude. So thank you for joining us. So yeah, we don't know there was a beginning. We just don't. Like, if you're claiming to know there's a beginning, I would like to see your paper on it. And there's quite a few physicists. So when he says all scientists say there was a beginning, he's just wrong. He's just misrepresenting what they actually say. They say there was a beginning to the inflationary period of the universe, not that there was a beginning to the universe.
Even scientific evidence like the Big Bang Theory, okay? Even if you meet somebody and they believe in the Big Bang Theory, right?
Sure.
Even that, if you believe in that, you have to believe.
Don't you believe in the Big Bang Theory? Okay, that's weird. That's weird. The scientists believe this. And if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, yeah, it's the best description we have for why the universe is expanding at the same rate nor same direction. Maybe he doesn't believe in it. Maybe he thinks that the world was created in 6 days by a magic god man. I don't know. But you can't sit there and go, scientists believe this, and then say, oh, but, you know, if you believe in the Big Bang Theory, sure, yeah, okay.
Believe that there was a bang at the beginning, something.
No, that's the beginning of the inflationary period. Like, you're just basically proving you don't understand the Big Bang.
Happened at the beginning to cause this world to come into existence.
Why is everything zeros and ones? Why is everything zero? He's just used stock footage. Everything's zeros and ones. No. The universe isn't like that. You know, it is kind of, you know, I mean, if you do go to quantum, it's actually got 4 states, not 2. So yeah.
And so if everything that has a beginning has a cause, and we also agree that the universe had a beginning, regardless of how you think that beginning came to be, then premise number 3 must be true. And therefore, that is a fact that the universe must have had a cause.
Yeah, so that is the Kalam cosmological argument. And I've got issues with the Kalam. Number 1, universe doesn't necessarily have a beginning, right, for a start. And the funny thing is, and this has been pointed out again and again and again to theists, the Kalam doesn't get you to a God. Okay, let's just say the universe did have a beginning, and let's just say everything that begins does have a cause. Why is it a God? And William Lane Craig does a lot of tap dancing. You know, Low Bar Bill does a lot of tap dancing to try and smuggle in attributes to this God. And I think that his reasoning is very, very wishy-washy. It's very it doesn't follow. This is just the Kalam, but notice the universe had a cause. Where does it say God in any of that? It doesn't. There's no reason why the universe could not have been caused by a magic stone or you know, a magic unicorn, anything that is not a god. It could have just been natural processes. Like, it had a beginning, yeah, natural processes.
So since the universe began to exist, it must have a cause outside of itself. This cause must be powerful, right? Eternal, and not part of the physical universe.
No. Powerful, eternal. Why does it have to be eternal? Why does it have to be eternal? Why couldn't it be a prior state that was not the universe? Like, so when we're talking about things outside of the universe, we're talking about cosmological things, and that is what the Kalam cosmological argument is talking about. Sean Carroll had this idea of parent and child universes, that a parent universe causes another one, and then so on and so forth. We haven't addressed a cyclical universe, one where time loops upon itself. I don't believe that. I don't think there's any evidence for that. But how did you eliminate that, Alan Parr? This is the thing about making these deductive arguments, sort of saying, hey, this has to be a God because the impossibility of it being anything else. When we bring up other things, you can't tell us why it is not that thing. You can only make assertions that, oh, it is a God, it is a God, it is a God. Why can't it have been a natural process from parent to child universe in a cyclic cosmological structure? Why not? Oh, do you believe that? No, there's no evidence for that. But you're saying you know what it is because you are making the claim it is not any of the other possibilities. And do keep in mind that when you're making a deductive claim, you have eliminated any possibility that I or physicists or anybody out there hasn't thought of. Any possible cause for the universe. So how did you eliminate all of them? You know how they usually eliminate them? I was talking, I got to put a video up that was me going on with some precepts. And usually what they do, and it's a trick, it's just a word trick, it's a irrational argument, but they say that God exists because of the impossibility of the contrary, right? Because any other possibility is impossible. Do you know how they get that any other possibility is impossible? Because God, right? So it's a circular thing. God makes every other possibility not correct. And because every other possibility is not correct, it proves God. It's just a big circle. And that's how they get around it. But we know that that is irrational. And it's irrational because I could do that with literally anything. I could say, hey, the magic stone, the Blarney stone, shows the impossibility of the contrary. How do I know that everything else is impossible? Because the Blarney stone, it works with anything. So it cannot be a rational argument.
Which points to God as the creator. Now, we have...
It does not point to God as the creator. No, you have not established that in the slightest. Like, this is really lazy. It's sort of saying, hey, you know, there's this thing that I say, okay, let's just grant it has a cause. I'm not sure about that, but let's grant it. Everything that begins has a cause. Okay, I'll grant that for the sake of argument. You did not get to a God. This is a non sequitur. It's external to the universe. It's powerful. Okay. How is it an agent that made a decision to create the universe? You've got to show that. And you haven't. That's what a non sequitur is. It just does not follow.
Haven't gotten to the Christian God yet, right? So we're going to get to that.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. You've not got one step close to the Christian God. Yeah, no, I forgot about that. But I don't think you've gotten one step close to a God either. All you're saying is that the universe had a cause. That's your conclusion. That's it. It doesn't get you to a God. Like, you're not only claiming the universe had a cause, but the universe had an agent that is all-powerful, omnipotent, or as long as you believe in the God of classical theism, that he's omnipotent or all-powerful or maximally powerful, omnibenevolent, omniscient, he knows everything that's going on, the outcomes of all possibilities at all times. Like, how did you get to that? Not from that, not from a cause to all of these things.
At a little bit later on. So the first argument is the cosmological argument, those three statements. And the second one is the good old-fashioned teleological argument.
Oh, yeah, the teleological. So this is the watchmaker argument, and I'll explain why this one is absolutely terrible in just sort of a simple question.
Now, this also has three statements that you need to help the person understand. First statement is pretty obvious. Every design has a designer.
Every design has a designer. Well, yes, that's sort of that is implicitly understood. Yes. So we understand design as things that have been designed by an intelligent person, like, you know, something intelligence using it to make something or put into a plan something, right? So we would say that what's a good one? A sort of a, you know, hole in the sand that a fish digs to hide is a design. But if that hole was just created by a rock, we wouldn't see that as a design. It's just a natural formation. We don't see things that occur by natural, unguided process necessarily as design. We see them as just natural process leading to formation. But if you're talking about evolutionary design, for instance, that's a bit different. So I feel like it depends what kind of design, how you're defining that design.
That's clear, right? When you see something that is complex, something that's ordered, like this Apple Watch right here.
Yeah, so the watchmaker argument. Yeah, so the original teleological design, it basically was the watchmaker argument. It was basically that you're walking on a beach and you come across a watch. You know that that watch has a designer, right? You don't need to be told it. It just seems too complex. You pick it up. It has a designer. You know it's something unusual. Therefore, it has a designer. And we have all these mechanisms in nature that, you know, are basically the same as the watch. Now, the problem with that is that it's not one thing designed in the middle of stuff that hasn't been designed. Right? So an internal critique says that those grain of sands were designed as well. All right? The grains of sand were designed, the water beside it was designed, the trees were designed, everything was designed. So why does the watch stand out? Right? Why is it different than any other designs out there? Like, why does it even, you know, stand out at all if everything is designed? The question is, what are you comparing it with that's not designed? Because what we do is we compare things that are designed with things that are not designed. Like we compare, like, for instance, the hole made by a fish to hide is compared to the one caused naturally kind of thing. Like, we compare these two, but you've got nothing to compare to. In fact, name me something that you're comparing the watch against that wasn't designed. What wasn't designed? Literally everything in your worldview is designed. Everything, down to those grains of sand, down to the molecules, everything was designed. So you literally have nothing to compare that watch to. It should see the same. You should look at it and it will be the same as the other designed things, i.e. the grains of sand on the beach. Because they're all designed according to you.
Here, or this phone over here, or this microphone, or a painting, or a building. We all naturally conclude that it was designed by someone, not by chance.
Well, no, we conclude that because we know these things are made by humans. They are designed by humans. That's what we know. So if we have, say, a fake plant, you've probably got a plastic plant in your background there. We don't look at it and go, oh, we know that's designed. We go, is that plastic or is that a real plant? We don't know. And this is where the teleological argument falls down. It's because certain things have the appearance of design, but they're not designed, right? You have stones stacked up, but, you know, sort of thing, stacked on top of one another. You can have like stones that look like they've been stacked by people, but they haven't been. They've just had the wind eroded around, the wind has eroded the sort of particles around them, and they look like it's a design, but it's not. There is, I'll try and find a fictional one, hagstones, right? There's these things called hagstones. They're basically stones with holes in them, and they look designed, but they're not. I'll just get a... Okay. So this is what I'm talking about. Now, these are hagstones. They're completely naturally formed, and we understand how they're formed. They're basically softer rocks that are in the river, and due to the way the river flows, it basically erodes holes in them. But to us, they look designed. We go, hey, someone's drilled a hole in it, because we understand that that thing doesn't form in nature, but they do. And it's not a design, right? It's just naturally occurring. So he says, oh, these things don't happen by chance, but they do. And the whole point is that certain things do have the appearance of design, such as the same as the human body and other organisms. They have due to evolution, they have the appearance of design, but they're not designed, at least not top down, like somebody orchestrated them. I like to point to the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The recurrent laryngeal nerve is a nerve that runs down one side of the body and up the other. And it covers sort of a really long distance in your body. But it's only there to cover a very, very short distance. And I'll get a picture of it so you can see it. Is that a good picture? Oh. Okay, so this is the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Okay, it goes all the way down from there, loops around the aorta, right, and all the way back up. Now, this is an incredibly inefficient design. Like you can imagine, you could just connect the two and then have something else coming out. Why does it go around the aorta? It goes around the aorta because of evolution from fish. Because when fish had this, it was not. It is not a problem because it would loop the aorta, which is much closer to the head in fish. Now imagine a giraffe, because a giraffe has the same thing. It still does the same. It goes all the way down the neck, loops around the aorta, and goes all the way back up the giraffe's neck. Right? This is incredibly inefficient and terrible design because it wasn't designed. It was just evolution in motion. And evolution is not chance, for instance. It's not chance. It's deterministic, but it has to work with the previous iterations that it has. So this is the kind of thing that we see in the body, if coming about from changing that body plan over and over and over. And there's a lot of things like this. There's the fact that we use the same orifice for speaking, breathing, and food, down to the point where people choke to death. It is a terrible design. It's like using the fuel intake and air intake as the same thing for your jet or something. It's ridiculous. Something isn't designed because it has the appearance of design. Something is designed because it actually has been put together in a top-down manner, trying to be inefficient as possible. Yeah, Fred, like that's what I believe Hawking said that. Stephen Hawking said that if the universe is designed for anything, it's designed for black holes. So yeah.
We don't believe that this watch you just throw a whole bunch of parts into a box, shake up the box, and boop, out comes a watch. Who believes that? Nobody believes that.
Yeah, but that's not what's happening here. That's not what's happening. That's sort of saying, well, snowflakes, for instance, we understand why snowflakes form, and they're all different because the conditions are different. If you shake them up, yeah, there's snowflakes come out. They're marvelously complex, but there's no design to them. It's just the laws of nature working. That's it. Okay, fellow, looks like if you're going to throw insults around, mate, you're going to have a little bit of a rest. Little bit of a rest. Don't call people buffoons. Come on now. Ugh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Therefore, I concur it would be extremely rational. What? Because of efficiency versus adaptability? Aesthetics versus scalability? What the hell are you talking about? It's functional, still retains simplicity? What the hell? Therefore, you concur. Concur is agreement with something. Like when you concur with something, you're agreeing to it. You're not sort of saying, "Hey, this is what I believe." It does, yeah. So it does seem like he's asked like ChatGPT agree to design and give your reasons because it's saying he concurs. Like so, ChatGPT is concurring with him. Kind of very telling on the language there. Because no one's concurring. Like when you concur, you agree to something. You agree on something. Like if someone says, "Hey, your show's good," I would say, "I concur. I agree to that. I agree to that." Right? You concur. So you wouldn't say to someone that disagrees with you, "I concur." You wouldn't say that because it means you agree with them. So that's how we know that you're not actually just talking straight. It's because you're using these terms that don't make sense.
Look at this watch and we see how complex design it is. We all agree that it had to be some mind behind it that designed this watch.
As opposed to what? According to you, that watch, that plant, the air outside, the molecules that you're breathing, everything was designed. So what are you comparing it to that's not designed? Right? What isn't designed that you're comparing it to? You're saying this watch is special. No, it's not. It's designed just like everything around you. What isn't designed?
And even secular, non-Christian scientists and atheists would agree that the universe.
Oh no, don't worry, Deviant. It's not a problem at all. I know everybody does what they can. I have no expectations that you'll like stop your life in order to, smack bad boys on my channel. Wow, that sounds a lot sexier than it really is.
Universe and life on Earth shows incredible complexity and fine-tuning, from the structure of DNA to the precise conditions needed for life to exist. And if you want more on this, I don't have.
Yeah, precise conditions needed. Yeah, we don't know exactly how precise they are. The Goldilocks zone was a lot narrower in the past. We kind of understood that we can actually, there's a bit of wiggle room in there. It's not in the best place. Like the Earth could be more stable with a larger moon, for instance. Dude, you can't just say, "Hey, because it looks designed, it's designed." Well, the hagstones look designed, but they're not. So this is absolutely just sort of an appeal to incredulity. That I don't believe that these things could come about. I am incredulous that these things could come about by natural process, so I'm not going to believe it. But snowflakes are incredibly complex and they come about by natural process. Storms are incredibly complex and they come about by natural process. But you say they've been designed? You're going to have to prove that, mate.
I don't have time to go all in this video. I want to encourage you to check out my video on the multiverse. It's going to go into much more detail on the specifics of the fine-tuning of the universe.
I mean, I could, but yeah, I don't really want to.
So first and foremost, every design has a designer. Second of all,
the problem is that you are begging the question. You're assuming that the universe is designed without actually showing that is the case, right? You're basically saying, well, the universe is designed by an agent. Well, you have to show that, as opposed to naturally forming. You have to show that. You can't just state it.
The universe is highly designed. Third of all, the universe must
counter the argument. Oh, well, I don't know if the universe has a multiverse or not. I don't know. I don't claim to know where the universe came from. I don't know where the universe came from. I'm not the one making the claim. You have to demonstrate that it was a god. I don't have to demonstrate shit because I am not saying that, hey, this is where the universe came from and its previous state. I don't, why would I have to prove anything? The universe must have a designer. Must it? Why? Why?
Must have a designer. Do you see how these statements kind of flow naturally and logically?
Yeah, the set of criteria for something being designed is that it has a designer. There's some hallmarks of design too: efficiency, simplicity, complexity, and inefficiency usually isn't good design, and we see that everywhere. What's your criteria for something that's not designed? What's your criteria for something that's not designed, fellow? What's your criteria for something that's not designed? I mean, I'd love for you to tell me, because like I said, I asked a question. What isn't designed? How can you possibly have a criteria for not designed if you think everything, literally everything in the universe was designed? Like, what's your criteria for telling that? Because whatever your criteria is, you won't have a criteria for not designed. I guarantee it.
Logically from one to another, right? So the universe must have had a designer. And this ultimately points to God as being the intelligent designer behind everything that we see.
Yeah, I think that's a non sequitur. I think that sort of the idea that you believe everything has a designer because it's designed by a designer, it's kind of this big assumption that the universe is designed by an intelligent being. I think that it really is just an appeal to incredulity. It's basically, I don't believe, I'm incredulous. I cannot believe that this came about by any kind of sort of any kind of natural process. So therefore it has to have a designer. No, that's a fallacy. It's the appeal to incredulity. Oh, so it's got to have intelligibility to be designed. Well, there's a ton of things. Rocks don't have intelligibility. Rocks don't have any intelligibility, so they're not designed. So God didn't design rocks. Or trees, they don't have any intelligibility. Yeah, there's a ton of things. My cells don't have intelligibility, so they weren't designed. My cells don't have any intelligibility, so they weren't designed. They don't have it. I don't have any sustainability, so I wasn't designed. I will die. I will end. And that's a lack of, efficiency. I actually asked you for the criteria of non-design. That's what I asked for. Okay. So anything that doesn't have aesthetics is not design. Yeah, so what you basically said is that anything that doesn't have this criteria is not designed. So that includes my cells, that includes my rocks. That includes a whole ton of things. That's almost everything. That is almost everything in the universe. Like, to say that the universe is simple and the laws of the universe are simple, no, they are not simple. Have you ever done physics? The laws of the universe are not simple. The laws of the universe are really complex, and we're not even sure we understand them now. Study quantum physics. It's insanely complicated. There's nothing simple about it. You think the universe is simple? Really? Wow, okay, I don't know where you're getting that from, but you've just proven that the universe is not designed. Congratulations. Congratulations. Wow. Wow. So any system that exhibits usability, efficiency. So this is what you're saying. Any exhibit that exhibits usability, efficiency, functionality, aesthetics, scalability, sustainability, innovativeness, reliability, adaptability, simplicity, longevity, and intelligibility, right? So usability, the universe has no usability. What are you talking about? What do we use it for? Who uses it? What? Human systems are so inefficient. I just pointed out the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So we've missed efficiency, absolutely missed efficiency. Functionality. What functionality does the universe have? What the hell? We don't use the universe for anything. Aesthetics is entirely subjective, I might add. What's aesthetically pleasing to us may not be aesthetically pleasing to somebody else. So I don't know how you're even going to get aesthetics into there. What? Scalability. What the hell? Like, you're talking about human design. This is human design. Like, but if that's your things for design, then universe, cells. Okay, stop all capsing for a start. Stop all capsing. If these are the criteria for a design, like if they lack these, right? Not designed, lack all of these traits. Well, reliability. They lack all these traits, do they? Reliability. The universe isn't reliable. I don't know what you're talking. I don't think you know what you're talking about. For all things that possess these 12 traits. Yeah, right. So you're saying that you're flipping back and forward. You're saying, hey, something that lacks all that trait, something that's not designed lacks all those criteria. What is it that lacks all those criteria, fellow? What lacks all those criteria? What are you applying this criteria to? What is not designed? So if I design, so here's the stupidity of your argument. And I really have to point this out, fellow, because it's the most stupid argument I've heard in quite some time. What it means that if I make a really inefficient network, right? I set up a network and it's really inefficient. It has, it's broadcasting when it shouldn't broadcast. Cables are everywhere. It doesn't look very good. It's incapable of being scaled up to a larger network. It'll break down over a while. It's violated multiple these. Then under your definition, that was never designed. I didn't design it. It just occurred naturally. It just popped out of nowhere, being not designed. You said, and I'll point this out just to show how dumb this is. I'm sorry, it is so dumb, right? It is so dumb. Something that is not designed is something that lacks all of those criteria, right? I could design something that lacks all of those criteria, all of them. And then you would say, no, it's not designed. It's not. It's not. Ridiculous. Yep, I'm afraid so. You've got to stop going to ChatGPT for your arguments, seriously. Yeah, if you're going to copy and paste from ChatGPT, yeah, I think you're going to be leaving, because we're not doing this.
Okay, so
yeah, you're listing the criteria of good design, fellow. You're listing the criteria of good design. It doesn't mean that if you violate all of them, it is literally undesigned. No, you're begging the question. What is not designed then? Answer my question. If you don't answer my question of name something that is not designed, then you're out of here. No, say it. Like, don't just shit all over the comments. And then I've addressed you directly. Answer the question. What is not designed? What has generated this conclusion? All right, you're out of here. You're out of here then. If you can't answer my easy question, what is not designed, then you're going to get the ass. Seriously, I'm not even joking. Answer the question. Answer the question. You got one more chance. Answer the question. If you don't answer my question in 30 seconds, I will kick your ass out of here. I asked you a direct question. Name something that is not designed that you have compiled this criteria from. I asked you a question. I've given you more than enough opportunity to answer it, and you're just refusing to. Yeah, he's just typing it into ChatGPT as we speak. I don't think it's going to get you out of this one, son, because in order to make a criteria, rocks aren't designed. So God didn't design rocks. Wow. Wow. Ecosystems aren't designed. So God didn't design ecosystems. Completely undesigned. Wow. Okay.
I love this third argument for the existence of God. It's called the moral argument. And basically, once again, it has three statements. First and foremost, every law has a lawgiver.
Oh, I agree with all of those things. I agree with all of those things. But for instance, ecosystems don't meet your criteria of all 12 things. It doesn't meet your criteria. You do know that, don't you? Isn't ecosystems incredibly aesthetic? I think so. Isn't it sustainable, self-regulating? So how does an ecosystem meet your criteria of not designed? If you have to violate all 12 of those things to not be designed, how does it meet that? Your arguments are ridiculous. You're saying, hey, if it doesn't meet all 12 of these criteria, then it's not designed. And then you give something that meets multiple of that criteria and say it's not designed. So your evaluation of what's not designed isn't actually true, because you're bringing up things that weren't designed that don't match your criteria. Congratulations. You have just debunked yourself. Congratulations. Holy crap.
Any law that you see in our society, whether it's laws of cheating, stealing, murder, whatever it is. Laws don't just appear out of nowhere, right? Whenever you see a law or a rule, there's always someone who created it. So just like human.
Okay. So this is conflation between laws, right? We have laws of nature. They're descriptive, right? They describe how things in nature work, how the universe works. Then you have legal laws. They're prescriptive. That what they do is they make prescriptions for how what behavior is expected to you, and then yeah, they are. But you said all 12. You said all 12. They're sustainable. They are reliable. Ecosystems are very reliable. They are efficient. What are you talking about? Anyway, I'm not even going to argue with you anymore, because you have just debunked yourself in giving something that doesn't meet your own criteria of that something that's not designed, that doesn't meet your own criteria. So you've actually just debunked yourself completely. The universe doesn't meet all 12. The universe doesn't meet all 12. What are you talking about? Oh my God. This is a tap dance that this guy's doing. So basically, he says that something's not designed if it doesn't meet all of this criteria, right? And now he's saying it could be designed, but anything that meets all 12 and you conclude it's designed means it's irrational. No, it doesn't. No. Because the universe doesn't meet all 12. So it's not irrational to think that that's natural. But then you'll switch back to saying, hey, in order to be non-designed, it's got to, fail on all 12 criteria. Like, he's all over the place. He wants to basically say, hey, I'm going to pick out these 12 things that I think are hallmarks of good design, apply them to the universe, and then try to somehow get it to be that that's designed. And it's ridiculous. It's like, either way he goes, because when asked to show something that's not designed, it meets some of those criteria, which it shouldn't under his original definition of, if it fails all of those criteria, it's not designed. It's rational to think it's not designed. And I'll get that in 1 second, because I can. Let me see here. Something that is not designed is something that lacks all of that criteria. Now, let's show the move in the goalposts here. All of those criteria in accordance. Basically, Mark, you cannot make me one thing that doesn't meet all 12 criteria that is not designed, right? All 12 criteria. Well, the universe doesn't meet all 12 criteria for a start, right? That would mean that the universe is simple. The universe is not simple. It would mean the laws of nature don't reach that, because the laws of nature are not simple. The universe is not intelligible. The universe doesn't have aesthetics, functionality, efficiency. No. So upon getting pulled up that the universe doesn't fit into his criteria that is designed, he then pivots back. No, my argument doesn't say that haven't got all 12 aren't designed, you plum. Really? You're going to start calling me names? Your argument says that something has all 12 is best explained by design, which the universe doesn't. So you've debunked yourself. Congratulations. And then he says the argument doesn't say something isn't designed if it doesn't meet all 12. That's exactly what you said earlier. Man, you are like FIFA in your goalpost moving. It goes back, it goes forward, you move it all around the place. The universe does meet all of them. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think you're done. I think you're moving around way too much. And your own criteria, you're trying to switch the criteria up and say, hey, it has to meet all 12. Oh, no, it has to fail all 12 to be not designed. Oh, it has to do this. Yeah, no, goodbye. I didn't realize you called me a plum. So, yeah, goodbye. I'm going to time your ass out. Boop. Think about what you've done. Come into a chat and called the person a plum. Even though I don't know what that is, I'm pretty sure it isn't a fantastic person. And yeah, stop using ChatGPT. You sound like an idiot, quite frankly.
Human laws come from lawmakers. Moral laws must come from a moral lawgiver.
So no. Our laws are prescriptive. They say, if you do this, right, if you violate this law, then this will happen to you. This is the punishment. They're prescriptive. They're basically what we made up, right, in order to keep a civil society. I haven't banned him yet. Just give him a timeout to think about, what the hell he's doing in chat, looking so stupid. Like, seriously, it changed 3 times what made but it's interesting to find out that God didn't design rocks or the ecosystem or anything like it. Interesting. So humans weren't designed. We have inefficiencies, apparently. And some parts of the human body are definitely not aesthetic. I mean, have you seen a cock lately? Look, where was I at? Oh, yeah, laws, right? We prescribe laws. We say, hey, if you drop litter, you will get this fine. That's not like the laws of the universe. You're just conflating things. You're just being like Comfort, the banana man, saying, hey, laws require a lawgiver. No, laws of nature are just descriptive. They're basically describing the functionality. You can't violate them. They're not like our laws where if you violate the law of gravity, no, you can't do that. That's not something you can do. So he's just basically conflating between human-made laws and natural laws, which he's been doing a lot of, conflating between human-made design and natural design. Like, what does that even mean?
So that's the first statement, right? Is that every law has a lawgiver.
Yes, every human law, because they're prescriptive. Laws of nature are different. We're just describing the properties of the universe. They're not the same.
The second statement, there is a moral law. Now, you can look across different cultures, different...
Yeah, prove it. A moral law. There's an objective moral law. Prove it.
Times, and people recognize that certain things are right and certain things are wrong. For example, most people, if not everybody, agrees that things like murder, stealing, and lying are wrong. And this shows that there must be some sort of moral code, some moral law that has been deposited within all of our countries.
Really? Then why do people actually violate that? Why do you have entire countries violating that? At the moment, Russia is invading Ukraine. Why is that? If it's a law, why is that? And what's the punishment? Like, if you compare it to a natural law that you can't violate, morals aren't like that. You can easily violate them. So are they more like a human law? Well, a human law isn't real. We made them up. They're subjective. We agreed on them. There's no thing saying that objectively, if you do this, you've got to be put into prison. That's something that we enforce. Like, so he's conflating here and not even doing that very well, because if you compare it to natural law, then why can moral law be violated? Because natural law can't. And if you're comparing it to human one, well, human law isn't a real thing. It's not like, but this whole moral law, I'm not sure about that, champ, because actual legislative laws or judicial laws are just a concept. They're just a social construct. They're made up. They're not real things. So I think that you have to show that there is actually an objective moral law. I mean, it's insane that you sort of just say, hey, there is a moral law. So what we're talking about is, are there moral facts? I've never really heard moral law before. Moral facts, things that are morally true, independent of anybody's stance. And I don't think there is. I think that you'd have to show that.
Consciousness that, how is it that every single person agrees? Now you might say,
well, it's because we have certain things that we want and need in life in order to be happy, that we're conditioned to draw towards these things in order to be content, or that things are better for us when they are done. And, being killed or hurt or maimed or any of this stuff, or, having things stolen, they're inherently bad for us, bad for our well-being. That we don't enjoy them. We don't like them. And so because of the human condition, and that we're a social animal, and that's important. Like, the fact that humans are social animals, you can't actually oh, fellow, seriously, if you're back, I'll give you one more warning. That didn't seem like the amount I timed you out from. Give me 1 second. If you're doing ban evasion, I am going to absolutely ban you. Fellow 1.2, hey? Kamikaze pilots. Okay, yep, you're gone. Goodbye. Yeah, freaking chat GPT idiots, I tell you what. Bam. Okay.
Someone might say, well, I don't agree that everybody agrees on issues of morality. Essentially, we do.
Yeah, except for maybe the Incas that slaughtered people, had sacrifices. The Norse had sacrifices. People disagree on all kinds of different things and only agree on the very base level needs of human survival. They disagree on tons of other stuff. So if this is moral law or moral fact, an objective fact, why is it the more that we go to search for it, the more people disagree on it? Why aren't we all coming to the same conclusion?
Right? So let me give an example. People who believe that stealing is okay, they don't believe it's okay for somebody to steal from them, right? So you might say, well, somebody might feel it's okay to steal. So that means their morality isn't the same as mine. They don't.
Well, I think that sort of it's relative. Like if you are starving and somebody has a ton of food that I think it's fine. I think it's fine. Like if someone has hoarded all of the food and you are starving to death, I don't necessarily think that stealing is bad in that case to, keep you alive and your family alive. I think that it is relative.
Believe the same thing that I do. Let's think about that for a second, because they may be okay with stealing from somebody else, but would they be okay if somebody stole from them? Or what about people who believe in sexual freedom, right? You might think, well, they don't have the same moral issues as I do because they just believe that anybody should be able to have sex with anybody, no matter what, anytime, any place, anywhere.
They don't think that. They think that sex should be between consenting adults, regardless of what sex they are. Like, they don't think any place, anytime, anywhere. What are you talking about? That's not what they believe. That is such a straw man of their position. It just has to be between consenting adults. All the other stuff still applies. You need consent. You can't just go out on the street. Like all of the other stuff applies. Like, why are you making it seem like there's no rules? Like, if people are gay, then they have absolutely no morals whatsoever. Bullshit. You're a liar.
They might think that for themselves, but would they be okay if someone were to do that to their teenage daughter, right? No, they probably
wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. But they're not doing it with teenage girls or boys. What are you talking about? Wow, what an asshole. Like, seriously, it's like he thinks that, they think that, age restrictions shouldn't apply to them. Nobody is saying that. Nobody's saying that. Wow.
You wouldn't. At that point, they would say, wait. There's laws in place here. There's a moral code here, right? This is violating my moral code for how I think things should be. What about people who murder other people? You might think, well, they think that it's okay to murder. No, but would they be okay if someone murdered their loved one? They would not. So the reality is we do agree on issues of morality.
Yeah, we do. On some, very, 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 very few. But, you're sort of making it sound like people are okay with this happening, but not okay to them. I just, okay, there's some people out there like that. So what? What now? Because there are people out like that out there. There's people that will steal but don't like being stolen from, gangs and stuff. They don't like being stolen from, but they'll steal from other people. So what's your point? That not everybody agrees with your morality. How is it moral law then?
Via our conscience. And the question is, who put that there? Why do we all universally agree that some things are right and some things are wrong? And this leads me to premise number 3. Therefore, it's because that, stealing is detrimental to me. Like if someone steals from me, it's detrimental to me. It's just like, I don't get why that's a moral law rather than a stance-dependent subjective thing. Because you pointed out, everybody agrees on morality, but some people will, attack other people and steal from other people. So their moral law isn't the same. Every law has a lawgiver, and we also understand that there is a moral law. There must be a moral lawgiver.
Yeah, so that's not the type of law that we're talking about. We're talking about this is ridiculous. This is Ray Comfort level of things. I'm going to assume that they're moral laws as designed by somebody and then say, well, there must be a lawgiver. No, I think the better explanation is that we are a social species, and certain pro-social behaviors are the same between social species because they are essential to survival. So our ability to use empathy and reciprocity are a result of those behaviors being pro-social in nature. They will encourage working together and sociability. And that's why they are consistent, not because somebody beamed into your head the idea that, slaughtering people is wrong. Wait, didn't God genocide a whole bunch of people? So, yeah, it wasn't that a thing.
If a moral law exists that everyone seems to recognize, there must be someone who gave that law. And this points to the existence of God, who is the source of these universal moral laws. So the reality is that God has left us plenty of evidence of his existence, but this still does not mean that Christianity is true, because there are other religions that also believe that God exists. So now we have to go deeper. And this now leads us to the third question. Did Jesus rise from the dead?
There is no reason to believe that.
So now we're getting closer to, is Christianity true? And so to help us answer this question, there's a few things we want to look at. First of all, historical evidence of Jesus. So there might be some people who say, well, how do we even know Jesus existed? Well, okay, hold on a second. Even non-Christian historians attest to the fact.
Yeah, historical consensus is that somebody or multiple people by the name of Jesus or Yeshua, as the name was at the time, probably lived around that time in that place. Like, it's not, that doesn't get you one step closer to a rising from the dead or any supernatural occurrence whatsoever. It's just saying, hey, he probably, and we don't even know with certainty that he lived. I don't take the mythicist camp because I don't know enough about it. I just go with scientific consensus or historical consensus. And they say, yeah, they probably lived, but they don't give an absolute certainty. They just say, hey, yeah, there was probably a person that lived around that, an itinerant preacher.
That a Jewish man named Jesus lived and was even crucified. So you can reference, for people who question Jesus' existence, you can reference sources outside of the Bible. People like Tacitus, people like Josephus, people like Suetonius.
Hold on. They never recorded that. Okay, Tacitus definitely didn't record it. He recorded there was a bunch of Christians, people that basically Tacitus said there's a bunch of people who call themselves Christians who believe that this person was crucified and rose from the dead. He did not even reference the crucifixion directly. He was referencing that people believed it, right? So, oh, hey, human girl. He was not saying that, hey, there was even a crucifixion. I mean, I can grant the crucifixion, fine, whatever. I don't really care. But Tacitus did not write about the crucifixion. He wrote about the people that believed that the crucifixion occurred and that Jesus rose from the dead. Now, Josephus, he recorded, again, he was not in the area. He recorded that people claimed there was a crucifixion and that they rose from the dead. Like, well, actually, he said Jesus was crucified, and at one point he called Jesus Messiah, right? This is what Josephus wrote. Now, there's a problem there, a massive problem with that part of Josephus, because Josephus, all of his life, was a very devout Jew. He died a very devout Jew. So the problem is there is no way a devout Jew would ever write that Jesus was a Messiah, ever, right? That's the problem. And the part that says that stands out as not fitting very well into the rest of the text. It lacks his usual flow that Josephus had when he did writing. So what this is, and if you want to go with scholarly consensus says that that part of Josephus was interpolation. It was the early church inserting things into the text to make it seem like Josephus acknowledged this person as a Messiah, whereas we know as a devout Jew, he never did, ever. So this is sort of this bait and switch that he's doing. He's saying, hey, Tacitus acknowledged this. Josephus, no, they didn't. They acknowledged that people believed this, not that it actually happened. And that is a big difference, a massive difference.
Like Pliny the Younger, Lucian of Samosata, I think is how you pronounce his name. They all affirm Jesus' historical existences. So this is not.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm granting that, hey, I'm going with biblical scholar consensus that Jesus was a person. It doesn't really matter. The question is, would Jesus rise from the dead? And none of these historians in any way support that hypothesis.
Not even in question at all. This establishes the non-controversial fact that Jesus lived. Now let's get to the more controversial fact, and that is evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Well, let's look at the empty tomb. If Jesus didn't...
Okay, empty tomb. We don't know there was an empty tomb. The stories are conflicting. For instance, the biggest contradiction between the two was that in Matthew, the women were too scared and said nothing to anybody about the empty tomb. And in Mark, the women were afraid, but they ran directly to tell the apostles, right? It's a massive contradiction in it. The empty tomb is not good evidence. The problem is that the writings of these people about it, the Gospels, we don't know who wrote them. If we're going for scholarly consensus, and you've already suggested that we should, then we do not know the authors were Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John for sure, right? We don't know them. Like, we don't know that they were the actual people. We think Luke was Luke just because he was writing in a style that was consistent with his apparent background, but we don't know that for sure. There's a couple that we know they didn't write them because of the, I think Mark references Mark in his own work, like he's talking third person. That was not written by Mark. So we know that at least one wasn't written by somebody, and somebody who was there. The only one for sure that we know was written by himself was Paul's writings, the epistles, because he signed his work. He said who he was, right? He were letters to other people. And what's remarkable about Paul's writings is not once does he mention the empty tomb. Not even once, right? He's writing to all of these people to convince them of the truth. And the biggest piece of evidence, that empty tomb that you say is just so overwhelming, doesn't even think it's worth mentioning. What that says is that the empty tomb was probably made up later on by people who were not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Paul. That's what it says to me.
Rise, why wasn't his body produced by his enemies to squash the movement? No historical record.
Why wasn't his body produced? Look, most of those most of the people that were crucified ended up in a mass grave. That's where most of them ended up. Now, the Romans usually would not give burial customs to the people that were crucified. However, there is a couple of examples where they did. I believe on one on a high up Roman's birthday, they allowed them to have their burial customs, but usually they did not. And there isn't really any reason why the Romans would allow the usual burial customs of the Jews to take place. So anyway, I'm not a historian, I'm not a biblical scholar, but that is my understanding. You know, and like usually a mass grave was where they're headed for, and the Romans didn't really care about the Christians at the early stages. They weren't being persecuted. This is a common misconception that as soon as the Romans knew about them, they were being no, that happened later. That happened 2nd, 3rd century when they were being persecuted. The Romans really didn't care about the Christians to start up with, just like they didn't really care about the Jews that much, only insofar as the amount of ruckus they were causing. Like they didn't really care about the sort of the peoples that they'd conquered religious beliefs. They just sort of, just put up with them, didn't really try to crush it out, because that made the populace unhappy and they wanted the populace not to riot. So they really didn't care that the Christians believed some guy had risen from the dead or not. Like, I don't know why the Romans would be crushing it out. Now, the Jewish people, the Sanhedrin and stuff, they might have an issue, but they're not the ones in control. They're not the ones, having this, who are doing the crucifixion and stuff. That's the Romans.
Exists of anyone disproving the empty tomb. What about the eyewitnesses? The Bible talks about over
what eyewitnesses?
500 people claim to have seen Jesus after.
Who? Yeah, so this is in Corinthians. So this is Paul writing to the Corinthians and basically saying, hey, he had appeared to more than 500 brothers. Well, what's the problem there? The problem there is that Paul, the one who's writing, was not at the crucifixion or afterwards. He wrote about it later. He came in later, interviewed people apparently, and then wrote about it. So he just put down, it appeared to more than 500 brothers. We don't know who they were. We don't know if they really did appear to that many people. We don't know if he came in later and somebody said to him, hey, 500 people saw it. Okay. Did he talk to the people? It does not say. Did he talk to these 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive? Were they? We don't know. Did he talk to them? We don't know. This is the thing. It just basically is just like, well, he appeared to 500 people. I'm going to write 500 people and we're going to take that as fact. No, we don't. That is, I can say right now that I did a double backflip and 500 people saw me. It doesn't make it true.
After his death in 1 Corinthians 15:6. Not only that, there is also writings outside of the New Testament. If you want to criticize somebody for using circular reasoning, right? There are writings outside of the New Testament that also testify that there were people who were eyewitnesses or believed they were eyewitnesses of the resurrected Christ.
There's some tap dancing going on there, isn't there? There are people who are eyewitnesses. Well, actually, they were believed to be. Well, they could have been people that said they were eyewitnesses. Yeah. So you don't actually have any eyewitness testimony, sir. That's what I'm saying. That these people wrote down that people believed it. It doesn't mean it actually happened. There's a problem there.
What about people who are willing to die for their belief, right? And why would they die for something that they knew was a lie? If they stole the body of Jesus and they knew that they stole the body, and they knew it was all just a hoax, why would they be willing to risk their lives for this? Look at the
Yeah, so it's a bit more complex than that. It's a bit more complicated than that, because we're basically taking the writings of people that came much later. Like even the I believe Mark was the earliest written account. Even that was sort of anywhere from 30 to 35 years after the event was actually written, right? 35 years later. That's a long stretch to get everything right. I mean, think about if you were describing the most monumentous event in your history, would you get everything right 35 years later? I know I wouldn't. Absolutely wouldn't. And what you've got to understand about Jesus and Christianity about this time is that it really was a doomsday cult or a doomsday religion. It was that I'm not sure when was the first, the earliest gospel. Some of them were written way later. I don't disagree, right? Oh no, you're right. It's about 70 AD. Yeah, 70. Gospel of Mark is 70 AD. I do apologize. I stand corrected. Yeah, 70 years later. Yeah, you are correct. 70 years later. So really all that you've got to go on is Paul saying there was 500 people that saw it, because that was supposedly earlier. Maybe I'm thinking of Paul's writings was about 30 years or so. Not 100% sure. No, that fair. Might have been 66 or so. Yeah. No, that's fair, Jade. I stand corrected. Yep. Yeah, fair enough. No, it wasn't a freak. That is not scholarly consensus. Sorry, it just isn't. And I wouldn't believe. I would believe the scholars, the biblical scholars, especially, some of them are Christian, rather than just, somebody off the internet. Sorry. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, the whole thing is that we don't know who wrote them as well. I'm not sure what the point I was using.
the transformation of some of the disciples. The apostles went from being fearful followers to bold preachers willing to face death.
Oh yeah, the religion really was imminent sort of doomsday. Like the Revelations talks about people marching with shields and spears and things like that. It really does sort of portray a imminent doom brought about, and Jesus sort of saying that the kingdom of God will be fulfilled before some of you even taste death. It really was an imminent thing. So you can imagine these people following their leader who is supposed to bring about in their lifetime, in his lifetime, a sort of this fulfillment of the kingdom of God, and that it would be established on earth, and he was going to do it himself, and it was all going to happen imminently. And sort of, scholars have pointed out it may have been the overthrow of the Romans that they're talking about, maybe not, but it was all very imminent. And then the leader who they thought would do all of this died. Now, as a wholehearted believer of this, how do you cope with that? That the person you thought would go on to establish the kingdom of God before you, in the next few decades or so, is suddenly out of the picture. Well, there's a few things that you could do. You could renounce your religion. That wasn't an option for some of them, right? They believed so firmly, and we've seen that time and time again. We've seen people that make prophecies still have followers 100% believing in them. This is the power of belief. It is not a stretch to think that they doubled down and said, no, he isn't dead. He appeared to me in a vision or in front of me, and I still believe he will do this thing. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. And then once you believe, you will find every evidence to convince yourself you are right.
Suggesting that they truly believe in the resurrection. Let me give you another reason.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it actually happened. That's the thing.
If you go through the book of Acts, no one ever refuted or disproved the resurrection of Jesus.
Wow, in the Holy Book, none of the religious believers put in the arguments of their opposition. Oh yeah, absolutely, Jade. 100% agree with that. The sunk cost fallacy. Like, I have come this far and I can't, if I drop this, it'll all be wasted. But I don't know why they would include people. I mean, the entire Jewish people still don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, right? Nobody ever, like this whole thing, there were plenty of Jewish people that absolutely refuted the legitimacy of Jesus. There was people being killed on the later persecutions, because as the Christians got more and more rowdy, they were persecuted. They absolutely were. Like, nobody's not saying that, right? But that was later in the next couple of centuries. But, at the time, there were people that said it didn't happen. So I don't know why he's sort of saying, oh, well, no one refuted it. No, none of the religious people wrote it down. There's a big difference. That would be like asking, well, why doesn't it say, and why don't the Mormons say that people discredited Joseph Smith? Well, I mean, it's a common thing in religions. You don't put in your criticisms. Was there a raid? I'm sorry, did I miss another raid? Maybe not.
I love this point. So when you look at the book of Acts, the disciples frequently brought up the resurrection of Jesus, right? Now, if this never happened, if the resurrection of Jesus never happened, you would have expected the listeners to immediately refute or deny that this ever happened. But this is not what we see. For example, Acts 2:32. This Jesus, Peter said, when he was preaching his sermon, God raised up, and of that we are all witnesses. Notice that when Peter said we all witnessed the fact that God raised Jesus from the dead, if this was not true.
Well, I mean, do we know that was Peter? Well, no. So Acts is traditionally attributed to Luke. I don't think there, Peter is there's First and Second Peter, but Acts was written by Luke. So Luke is saying, who we don't know was Luke, by the way. We don't know that was actually Luke, right? We don't know that. So Luke is saying that Peter said something that we don't know is true, and you're taking that as good evidence. So someone we don't know for sure said that Peter said something, and that's your best evidence. Okay. Wow.
Ooh. Wouldn't you expect the people to say, wait, I don't know about that. What you talking about, Peter? That we didn't.
How do you know they didn't? Is whoever wrote Luke, is he going to write down, well, Peter said we all witnessed this, and the people said, nah, mate, you're full of shit. Is he going to write that down? No, he's going to say all of the people agreed. We see this all the time. Like Trump goes out, has the entire crowd boo at him, and he's like, the crowd loved me. They thought I was the best president that had ever lived, even as they are booing and jeering and shouting that stuff at him. Like, just because somebody says it doesn't mean that it is true.
You didn't witness that. That's not true. You preaching some false stuff. Nobody said a word. What about Acts 3:15? And you killed the author of life, whom God raised from the dead. To this we are all witnesses. Or to
says who? Says who? Says they say it's Luke, but we don't know it's Luke. Great.
This we are witnesses. What about Acts chapter 5:30 and 32? The God of our fathers raised Jesus, whom you killed by hanging him on a tree. God exalted him at his right hand as leader and savior to give repentance to Israel and forgiveness of sins. And we are witnesses.
Great. Who wrote it, Alan? Who wrote it? Because we can't, like, you want to go for scholarly consensus? We don't know that was Luke for sure. Probably. How do we know he was telling the truth about events? Even if it was Luke, which I'm not satisfied that it is, but just say it was. I'll grant you that for the sake of argument. Just say it was. How do you know he was telling the truth? We don't. There's no corroboration for this narrative that is in the Bible. We don't.
To these things, and so is the Holy Spirit, whom God has given to those who obey him. Peter saying, look, I'm not making this up. You saw it. I saw it. All these 500 people, they saw with their own eyes. They were not hallucinating. We all saw the risen Christ.
Yeah, he said that they said that. Like, this is the thing. It's so wild that they think that, hey, any claim in this particular book has to be true. It has to be. It can't be false. It can't be a religious person putting down something that isn't true because it helps their religion. It can't be. It's impossible. It's impossible. Who was it that said that? I don't know. Beheaded Kamikaze, thank you so much. Book says a thing, therefore it must be true. Yeah, that's logic. That's a certain type of logic. Yeah, it means that, definitely Gandalf did, give the One Ring to Frodo. I absolutely, I mean, he wouldn't say, all of these things happened if it wasn't actually true.
Guys, why don't you believe? So in each of these situations and others, the resurrection of Jesus was never refuted. It was never denied. And it was
never written down that it was refuted or denied. Like, that's the difference. You're basically saying, hey, because this book that is a religious text, it's not historical, it's religious. A religious text doesn't mention any refutation, then nobody anywhere refuted it. Right? Ridiculous.
Never even questioned. And there's all sorts of other evidence that points to the fact that Jesus not only was a true historical figure, but also rose from the dead. But now we get to the fourth and final question that you hopefully will get someone to answer in the affirmative as we're asking the question, why must Christianity be true? Is the Bible true?
Yeah, someone did stand up about that, Jade. Like, we find a page of the Bible lost for all time that sort of says, this is a work of fiction and any resemblance to character to people living or dead is entirely coincidental. It'd be actually hilarious. But, the whole idea of why they don't denigrate their own religion in their religion's text is just, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You could apply that to any religion, like any religion at all. Why doesn't Joseph Smith, denigrate himself in his own book? Of course they don't. Of course they don't. But if you're telling me, the Jews that disbelieved what he said, and none of them sort of questioned it, yeah, you're lying. I'm really sorry, but you're lying. Because those Jews, they never held him up as the Son of God and, all of this stuff. And he never said that he rose from the dead. So, yeah, it definitely was denied. The Sanhedrin denied it. Like, seriously, I don't know why you would say something so extraordinary.
Now, why is this question essential? Because if we can prove that the Bible is true, then that means we must accept everything written in it as truth. So,
I don't know about that one, champ. I don't know about that one, champ. If you can prove the Bible is true, then everything in it must be true. No. In order to believe everything in it is true, you would have to show that everything in it is true. I don't think that's the way history works. Just because we can point to Romans and Rome and the amphitheater and all of it doesn't make all Roman history true. There was stuff that was made up. There just was. Julius Caesar claimed to be a god. He never was. Like we know that things that just because one document has some true facts in it doesn't make the entire document true. It doesn't. Okay? It just doesn't.
So how do we do that? Well, what we don't want to do is use circular reasoning and just say that the Bible is true because it claims to be true, right? In other words, you don't want to pull out, 2 Timothy 3, for all scripture is inspired by God. Because if you come across somebody who does not believe in your Bible,
Well, I'm glad he recognizes a circular argument. That's encouraging.
Then your argument is going to basically be it's going to be dead right then and there, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to know where to go in that conversation.
But you're doing the same thing, right? You're basically saying the Bible is correct about seeing the 500 people because the Bible is correct, right? Like you're basically doing the same thing. You're saying the book is true when it says that all of these witnesses saw it and all of them, nobody denied it and all of this stuff because the book says that. That's what you're doing. You're still doing a circular argument. It's just, a lot less simple than the one of, oh, it's true because it's true. And I have heard that from people. It's ridiculous, but I've heard it. The Bible is self-confirming. No, that's a circular argument. It is.
As soon as they say, well, I don't believe in your Bible, so give me reasons outside of the Bible why you believe the Bible is true. Well, I'm glad you asked that. Let's look at the historical evidence. So you can look at what historians have written, particularly about the event that happened in the New Testament. Watch this, it's very important. And essentially, you can reconstruct the entire story of the New Testament without even referencing a verse inside of the Bible, which gives evidence that what's inside the Bible is credible. I want to direct your attention to this graphic on the screen right here. And I want you to notice that these are all things that were written by secular historians. And
secular historians? I'm not sure about that one, champ. Josephus was Jewish. Cicero was obviously Roman. Tacitus was Roman. I'm not sure about secular, champ. I don't think secularism kind of existed in those days. You were atheist might have, but not secular. What are you talking about? That's so weird. That's such a weird thing to say. Don't apologize to him. Yeah, she's amazing. She's absolutely amazing.
You can reconstruct the entire story of the New Testament, not even using a verse in the scriptures. Let's take a look at it. Pliny the Younger wrote that Jesus' followers thought he was God.
Yeah, that doesn't mean he is. That doesn't mean he is. Muhammad's followers thought he was a prophet of God. That doesn't mean he is. Right? Joseph Smith's followers thought he was a prophet of God. That doesn't mean that he is. I mean, they've got affidavits from people saying that Joseph Smith was a prophet. Do you have affidavits from people? And they were there at the time. Like, this is ridiculous. The followers thought he was God. So what? A lot of followers throughout the ages have thought lots of people have been gods, and you don't acknowledge them.
Suetonius, he wrote that Jesus was a real man. He was called the Christ. He caused Jewish disturbance.
Right. So this is the part where we don't know if there was one Jesus or multiples, because Yeshua was a very common name at the time. And so he caused a disturbance. So what? So what? That does not get to either, a rising from the dead or godhood.
Can I get an amen, right? Jesus was always in.
No, you cannot get an amen. That is not amen worthy, even if I was to amen. Even if I did amen, I would not amen that. That is ridiculous. You're basically saying, hey, someone caused a fuss. Therefore, he's the Son of God and was crucified and rose from the dead. No, that does not follow. Like, show that he rose from the dead. Holy crap.
Conflict with the religious leaders. Let's look at it again. Celsus, he wrote that Jesus was allegedly born of a virgin.
Wow, that allegedly, yeah. No, there were people that believed that. Yes, we're aware that Christians existed. What we want to know is whether their beliefs were well-founded or not. And this does not get to whether they were well-founded. It just means there were a bunch of people running around that claimed something. With 4 BCE, 10 CE, and 185 CE. Okay. Oh, that's there. We have large fragments that are older than 350 CE. Star of Bethlehem can be the supernova of 185 CE. Yeah, I don't know. The Star of Bethlehem, I'm not 100% sure that was even a real thing. I really don't know. The idea that Romans would have a census in the place you were born, it negates the entire purpose of a census. And Romans aren't stupid. They were, the censuses that they did, they were there to find out how many people were in the empire so they could, use resources to improve the empire, direct to where they needed. The idea of doing a census, like having people move around to somewhere they don't live and then do a census, is bewilderingly bad, especially for the Romans. A much more likely explanation is that they needed Jesus to come from Bethlehem, but he quite obviously was from Nazareth. Everybody knew that he was from Nazareth, grew up in Nazareth, so it is much more likely that they had a story to say why he was born in Bethlehem and not in Nazareth, because the Jewish prophecy said that he would be born in Bethlehem. So, the idea that Romans would shuffle people to where they were born and do a census is just so nonsensical.
His father was a carpenter, and he had
That's true, Jedi. There was a story. Alexander was said to have a virgin birth. Yes, he was.
miraculous power. Josephus wrote that Jesus was a wise man, and his followers reported that there was a resurrection.
No, I don't think he said resurrection. I think he just said he was Messiah, and we know that was interpolated. We know that was edited into his story. So I don't think he actually mentioned a resurrection at all. He just said that there were a bunch of people who worshipped this person, calling themselves Christians.
The Talmud wrote that he was executed the day before the Passover and had magical power. What about
the Talmud, the Jewish text? Well, I mean, the Jews did think he was a prophet, a sort of a holy man, but they didn't think he was the son of God. And I don't think they said he was resurrected. So, yeah, that doesn't get you to the resurrection, sir. That does not.
Phallus? He wrote that Jesus lived, Jesus was crucified, and look at this. When he was crucified, there was darkness and an earthquake.
Well, actually, with Phallus, I don't think we have his writings as far as I can recall. I believe he was one where somebody quoted him as saying this kind of thing. Like somebody said, hey, let me have a look. Yes, so Sextus Julius Africanus quoted his works, and Sextus was a Christian. So he was quoted and saying, hey, Phallus said this, but we don't actually have the record from Phallus, I don't think. So there's only scraps of Thallus's work left, only bits and pieces here and there. So Phallus himself, so Sextus Julius Africanus writes concerning the passion of the Christ, concerning each of his deeds and his cures, both of bodies and souls, and the secrets of his knowledge and the resurrection from the dead. This has been explained with complete adequacy by his disciples and apostles before us. A most terrible darkness fell over all the world. The rocks were torn apart by an earthquake, and many places of Judea and the rest of the world thrown down. In his third book of the histories, Phallus dismisses darkness as a solar opinion. In my opinion, this is nonsense, and it tears off there because it's just a fragment. So it wasn't Phallus that said this. Sextus Julius Africanus sort of said, hey, Phallus called this darkness a solar eclipse, and I disagree. So it isn't a direct, like it is important that it isn't actually Phallus writing about this. Okay, it isn't. It is somebody else appearing to quote Phallus. How do we know the quote is correct? We don't. We don't, because Sextus Julius Africanus lived between 160 to 240 AD, right? So he was over 150 years later. Okay, so do we know this? No, we don't. That is so deceptive, sort of saying, hey, Phallus said this. No. Africanus said this. Sextus Africanus said this. And he was a Christian over 150 years later. It's a bit of a difference, isn't it?
Which is consistent with the accounts of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus in the Gospels.
Yeah, he probably read the Gospels, dude. Phallus was a Christian.
About Tacitus, he was called the Christ. His followers were called Christians, and he was executed under a man named Pilate. What about a man?
Yeah, so it was called the Christ. His followers were Christians. That is not proof for a resurrection. This is the thing. He'll say Tacitus, extraneous source confirms the resurrection. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. He said there's Christians. Like, seriously.
Man named Bar Serapion. He wrote that Jesus was a wise king. The Jews wanted him dead and that his teachings remain. And finally, what about Phlegon? He said that Jesus predicted
the future. Jesus rose after dead. I'm not familiar with this guy, but I would have expected to hear about him. You know, I really would have. Phlegon was a Greek writer and a freedman of the Emperor Hadrian who lived in the 2nd century AD. Okay, so this is over 100 years later. So again, we don't have his writings. Origin of Alexandria from 182 to 254 AD wrote that Phlegon in his chronicles mentions Jesus. Now, Phlegon in the 13th or 14th book of his chronicles not only ascribed to Jesus a knowledge of future events, although falling into confusion about some things which may refer to Peter as if they referred to Jesus. We got confused between Jesus and Peter, but also testified that they correspond to his predictions. He referred to a description by Phlegon of an earthquake during the reign of Tiberius. So it even stars appeared in the heavens. There was a great earth. Yeah, okay. But the point is that we're not actually getting any of these writings. What we're getting is people that lived later apparently referring to their writings. Do we know that it was an accurate quote? We do not, because we don't have what the actual writings were. People even today get, sort of quotes wrong and misinterpret quotes. So how do we know that over a century later it's actually accurate? Well, we don't. That's the whole point.
Predicted the future. Jesus rose after death. Woo! And he showed signs.
That's not a woo, sir. I don't recall him rising after death. Yeah, knowledge of future events, but he was getting confused between Jesus and Peter. And he didn't say anything about rising after death. He mentions an earthquake, apparently, that, he's not saying this himself. He's not saying, hey, there was an earthquake. It's Origin of Alexandria saying that, hey, Phlegon wrote about an earthquake, but he never said he rose from the dead. Ever. So I don't know what he's sort of talking about. Yeah, I've no idea. But again, he's sort of attributing to these people instead of people quoting their work and us not knowing how accurate that quote is.
Of crucifixion, my brothers and sisters, you don't need to go in the Bible to prove that what's inside of the Bible is true. Just look at history. Just look at what secular, non-Christian historians who had no...
Well, they weren't secular. They were kind of Roman and Jewish and stuff like that. But none of them recorded the resurrection. None of them did. And this is supposed to prove it. Yeah, this is horrible. I agree, Jessica. This is supposed to prove it, where all it is, hey, there's some authors that quoted people. And I mean, some of them were Christians. Like you're saying, hey, they were secular, whereas that's not true. Where you got that from was Christians quoting secular people, Romans and stuff. Yeah, that doesn't mean you have no bias towards the Christian narrative, because we're not getting it directly from that independent person. We're getting it from a Christian perspective on what they said.
No bias or reason for why they would want to write this other than the fact that they wanted to be considered to be true historians. Here you have the entire...
Yeah, but what they wrote was absolutely true of what they knew, that there are a bunch of people that believed something. This is the wild thing. It's sort of like, well, if there's a bunch of people that believe something, it must be true. Oh, so Muslims? No. In my religion, not your religion. In my religion, if a bunch of people believe things, then it's true. But not your religion. No. That's just false and people believing something that's not true. Oh, but that didn't happen in my religion. Wow.
Entire story of the gospel accounts, specifically the life, death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, using extra biblical resources. But there's so much more.
You mean presenting a false narrative of extra biblical resources and saying that we have the writings of these people when it's not. We have the writings about the writings of those people, and that's a very different account.
More. What about archaeological discoveries? For instance, things like the Dead Sea Scrolls. What about cities that are mentioned in the Bible? Places that people thought, oh, well, maybe that's not in the Bible, but through archaeology, they were able to rediscover certain cities, certain things that were in the Bible that support the historical accuracy of certain biblical events and places. And then my favorite.
Wow. Yeah, we know that Judea existed. We know that, Galilee existed. We know that all of these places, that doesn't make the events true. That doesn't make the events true. The most quoted example is, well, New York exists, but that doesn't mean Spider-Man is real. There's a lot of stuff in the accounts of the Muslims of cities that they came up against and things that real people that actually lived. Does that make Islam true? Of course not. You can have a lot of true places and true events that were real. It doesn't make any other claim real, like supernatural elements or fantastical stories. If I give a story about, going down to a pier in a town called Bunbury, south of Perth, and I catch a fish that's magic, and then it gives me a wish, and I make the wish, and it backfires. Just because the place exists and the jetty exists doesn't mean that the rest of the story is true. How do you not understand this? This is incredible that they go, oh, well, the place is true. And that a church existed there. So it all must be true. Everything is true. Wow. I have a bridge to sell you, sir. Holy crap.
What about prophecy fulfillment? My brothers and sisters, the Bible contains prophecies fulfilled hundreds of years later. For instance, Jesus' birth in Bethlehem was prophesied in Micah chapter 5, verse.
Oh, wow, we covered this already. Yeah, that was probably added to the text because he had to be born in Bethlehem to fulfill the prophecy, and everyone knew he was from Nazareth. So the problem then becomes, how do we get him to fulfill the prophecy? The Romans are doing a census that for some reason, some insane reason, they require you to go back to where you were born because to make the census inaccurate, I guess. This is something the Romans never did.
Verse 2, hundreds of years before the Messiah even came, these fulfilled prophecies provide evidence that the Bible is divinely inspired, right? So when you look at certain things that were written in the Bible and you ask yourself, how could these people have known what was going to happen 500, 600, 700 years in the future when you and I couldn't even tell what's going to happen a week from now? The only logical explanation is that it had to have been inspired by a divine author.
Oh, yeah. Or else, the people that were claiming to be the Messiah read the prophecies, then did the things. One of these amazing prophecies was that they would enter Jerusalem on a donkey. I mean, really? If I wanted to start my religion and there was a prophecy from an old book, I could pretty easily make that happen, right? That would be pretty simple. All you need is a donkey and be at the location. That's it. What about the prophecies he didn't fulfill? I mean, the old prophecies said that the Messiah would be a great warrior, a leader of a warlike leader, a warlord, a fighter, a great warrior. Jesus was no such thing. No such thing. Jesus also made the prediction that the kingdom of God would be established on earth before some of the people standing here have tasted death. That didn't happen. It's a failed prophecy. What happened? They're all dead now. What happened there?
What about the unity? Unity despite diversity. Despite being written over 1,500 years by 40 different authors, the Bible maintains one coherent message centered on God's plan for humanity, further suggesting divine orchestration.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. The Old Testament conflicts a lot with the New Testament. And don't forget, you've got to remember how the Bible comes about, right? Like how it actually gets to the form it is now. It was in the ecumenical councils that they, like Constantine, the emperor of Eastern Roman Empire at that time, basically put together Pilate. Oh, God damn it, the freak. That is not how you spell Pilate, dude. Seriously. Seriously. No, we know Pilate was a real person. That's not up for grabs. It's frigging Pilate, okay? God, if you're going to quote something, fucking get it right. Like, seriously. It's not, he's not. Yes, Pilate was a real person. Gotcha. Yeah. But just because, Michael Jordan is a real person doesn't mean that Bugs Bunny is. Like, just because in your thing you have one person, well, just because the Harlem Globetrotters are real people, it doesn't mean that the Scooby-Doo gang is. Because I saw Scooby-Doo and the meet the Harlem Globetrotters, and they were all in one thing. But just because one thing in that story exists doesn't mean that everything in that story exists. That's the problem. They did indeed. Plus, we have coins with his face and name on it, Jedi. We have coins of Pontius Pilate around the place. But with this one, what you've got to understand is they put the book together through careful consideration of what worked. Okay, so there was a lot of non-canonical texts, right? There was a lot of texts like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. There was all of these other texts, apocryphal. I can never say that word. Apocryphal texts. The apocryphal texts. They're sort of ones that were decided that they were going to be left out, and some of them for good reasons, some of them because they just didn't fit. But you've got to understand that the Bible isn't this sort of these books that were set in stone that we kind of put together. It more was a collection of stories and narratives and all of these things, and they put them together to make one sort of coherent sort of book. And that's what Constantine did, because he was sick of all of the Christians fighting. So he basically decided what was canonical and what wasn't canonical, what would be left out. That's the reason it fits, and it still doesn't fit that well. There are glaring inconsistencies between them. I mentioned the one earlier about the women. In one, they run to tell everybody, all of the apostles, and the other, it says they told nobody. So there are some glaring inconsistencies in them.
And basically, this means, my brothers and sisters, do you think it's possible to put 40 people in a room and ask them to agree on all things morality, agree on all things historical and whatnot? No, you'd have all kinds of different opinions. But when you look at the scriptures written by 40 different authors over 1,500 years of time, some are written in caves, some in prisons, some on an island, all sorts of different places over a period of time. And yet all of them agree on this.
Yeah, it would if you got people to write those things, then you went in later and curated what you include and what you leave out. Right? Like you go, hey, this is canonical and this is not. What you've got to understand is the Bible did not start that way. It was edited into what it is now. And that was done by Constantine. We know he did it. They put together the Council of Nicaea, the other ecumenical councils, to actually do that, decide what the consistent message was. And that's what they did. And that's why it looks so, like you say, so consistent. It's because that was placed upon it. It wasn't just, hey, we got all these things together and they all agreed. Because if you do that, you'll end up with the Infancy Gospel and these other ones that completely contradict the rest of it. And that was the problem in Eastern Roman Empire. It was basically that Christians were really disagreeing on the message. Constantine remedied that. You can't then claim, oh, well, it's amazing that it all fits together. Yeah, because someone went and fit it all together.
The same central message, my brothers and sisters, that gives strong evidence that the Bible is true. So, in conclusion, if truth exists, number one, then that means it's possible that we can know that God exists and that God's existence is true. Not just true for you or true for me, but true for everyone. And if God exists, then we're getting closer to Christianity existing, because Christianity claims that God exists. And
you really fell on the first hurdle there, Alan. You really went, well, if truth exists, then God must exist. No, absolutely not. Even if truth did objectively exist as something, you still haven't gotten to a God out of it. I don't know why you would. You sort of seem to hinge that upon, laws require lawgivers. And it's just, well, no, they're not laws like we're talking about. What are you talking about?
if Jesus rose from the dead, that means that the greatest miracle in human history has already occurred.
That's a lot of ifs. That's a lot of ifs stacked up on one on top of another. Like, this is the thing. When you're skeptical, you're not saying, well, wouldn't it be cool if this was true and I'm going to believe it? Like, if you're going if, it's kind of a slippery slope argument. It's got various similarities to it. Slippery slope is when you're saying, well, if this happens, then this happens after this. And it's so many ifs that you can't reasonably expect the conclusion to hold through all of it. It's kind of like, if we let people, sleep with anybody, then they will go and sleep with, household appliances. It's kind of like there's a lot of ifs in there. So, with that many ifs, I think that you really get to, well, it's unlikely that a God exists, because all of these ifs you see to be taken for granted when there's no evidence for any of them.
Dead man being raised from the dead, never to die again. And if the Bible is true, then everything written in the Bible must be true, which proves that Christianity is not only true, but it is the only way to get to heaven. My brothers and sisters, I hope and pray that these 4 questions will guide you in your conversations with people who do not believe what you believe, and you'll hopefully help them understand that Christianity is true. And by deduction, that means that other religions are not true. And if you don't accept Christ, you're not going to experience heaven, but you'll be separated from God.
Oh, you always have to have the threat at the end by these guys, right? You always have to have the threat at the end. Oh, but if you don't believe, you're going to be tortured forever. Don't forget about that. I find it interesting because you could apply the same criteria to Muhammad and Islam, right? And sort of come up with the same conclusions. So it's a bit of a problem.
For all eternity. Don't forget, if you want access to our Bible.
Yeah, I really don't. Oh, that was grim. That was really bad. Holy crap. Yeah, and kind of bit dishonest, I think, the way that he sort of said, hey, these writing are from secular people, when some of them weren't. Some of them were writings about non-Christians' writings, that they're quoting them or citing them, basically. I think that that's really dodgy to sort of say, hey, it's sort of like if say, Stephen Hawking, we have a writing of his saying, well, Einstein said this, so therefore, and makes a conclusion. You're basically saying, well, Einstein said this, right? Like, it's a problem because you're not accurately citing where you got it from. You're leading people to believe that the conclusion that Stephen Hawking made is actually Einstein's conclusion, and that's not true, right? So that's a problem. And sort of the way that he's sort of saying, hey, there's 500 people said in the Bible, so there were 500 witnesses. No, we don't just take that as granted. We don't just take it as granted that in history, if a guy who was made king after a person died says, hey, everybody saw that it was this person. We don't take it at granted that it is, right? We don't just take that as granted. We want to have evidence that that is the case, like non-biased sources saying, hey, yes, it was him. We don't just take it as fact. So the whole thing about the Bible being historical is that if it's historical, then you've got to apply historical methodology to it. And in that case, you can't just take supernatural accounts as a given because the text says it happened, or other historians around at the time said that people who followed the religion believed it happened. Because if we did that, then we would think every religion would have to be true, every single one, and they're conflicting. They're contrary to one another. They can't be all true at the same time. Putting down, and I'm glad Jade brought up that it was 70 AD. I thought it was earlier than that. I guess even if it was 30, 40 years afterwards, it still would be an immense amount of time for recording accurately details, writing it down. And the bigger thing that I think all preachers and pastors do, the bigger thing is they automatically attribute the Gospels to who the earlier church says wrote them, when we know no such thing. No such thing. They are not, we don't know that they were written by these people. Traditionally it has been accredited to them. We don't know that. And the other problem with them is, like, for instance, the long ending of Mark. I believe it's Mark 16 from memory. Basically, that we know things were added to this Bible. We know they were. There is one of the passages in Mark. Basically, is it 16 or 19? It's 16, right? The long ending of Mark. Yeah, 16 chapters. Yes, the long ending of Mark. So basically, in most Bibles, not the KJV for some reason, because they can't acknowledge the truth, basically it ends at verse 8. But it didn't used to. Okay, why didn't it used to? Why didn't it used to? DeFreak, stop saying that. Stop saying that stuff. Look, we know that we knew that it ended we thought that it ended in Mark 16 at verse 19 or 20. Yes, verse 20, right? And then we found manuscripts, earlier dated manuscripts, right, that don't have Mark 9 to 20 in it. Right? It was added later. It was a later addition. This is the problem, that we don't know what else was added because we don't have the originals. That is a fact. They're not the original work. They weren't the original stories. They have been copied. And what else has been added? We don't know. We literally don't know. But we know at least some was. The long ending of Mark is the real killer for the reliability of the Gospels. Because Mark 16, 9 to 20, they were added later. So how do we know that some of the other passages weren't added later? Like, how do we know that, some of the parts of Acts weren't added later? We don't. We can't have 100% confidence in that. What else was added? We don't know. But that ending of Mark definitely was. And that's the part, the crazy thing is that's the part that deals with handling snakes and drinking poison and not getting sick, laying on hands, talking in tongues. People still do that, even though we know that was added by somebody later to speak of all the miracles that the Christians can do. And they still believe it. Crazy, hey? Anyway, thank you for joining me. I was unimpressed with Alan Parr. Never saw him before. He's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. Wasn't Isaiah Old Testament, Jessica? I'm pretty sure that was Old Testament, was Isaiah. Good old Isaiah. Yeah. 8th century BC. Yeah, that's Old Testament. but yeah, some of that is like the Old Testament's even more dodgy. Like seriously, Old Testament is even more problematic, especially since Moses, we're pretty sure didn't exist. The Jews were never enslaved in Egypt, like in the city of the Pharaoh. That is never something that happened. We know this from historical accounts. We know it from cultural dissimilarity. We know it from sort of texts that were found. But what we're pretty sure of, at least as far as I know, because as I said, I'm not a biblical scholar, I'm not a historian. This is just the best of my knowledge, that the Jews were a vassal. They were vassalized by the Egyptians, because that's essentially what happened in those days. You ran over somebody, basically said, hey, we can kill you, we can destroy you, you give us tribute, and we won't run our armies over you. And you get the protection of these fine guys with swords. So you either have them protect you or they get to use their swords. Okay, so that's how it sort of worked back then. So, this whole story of out of Egypt seems to be allegorical. It's sort of this fictional story of how they left Egypt, which is how they sort of stopped being a vassal rather than an actual leaving of Egypt. Proved history is just as unreliable earlier. Well, I don't think so. I think some history is pretty reliable, some isn't. Like for instance, we have the question of Richard III, right? Like famously, a Shakespeare play was written about him. That he was a evil, tyrannical hunchback who murdered the true heirs to England in a tower, right? And this was written, Shakespeare wrote about how now is the winter of my discontent kind of thing, Richard III. But we're pretty sure now, because we found pictures of him, that he wasn't an evil tyrant and that he wasn't hunchbacked. He had scoliosis, but he wasn't a hunchback. And that he was the regent for these princes for a long time before Henry Tudor conquered the capital, right? Like, so Henry Tudor came in and took over the capital, and the real heirs turned up in the tower, unfortunately passed away. But who actually did this deed? Well, Henry Tudor would want you to believe it's Richard III because that legitimized his rule. But was it actually him? We don't know. We just don't know. From the stuff that's been made up, and Henry Tudor was the one who commissioned the plays of Richard III. It may have just been that Henry Tudor did it, and we lean that way. But do we know for sure? No, we don't. That's the thing about history. It is pretty murky, especially when, and that's only like back in the days of the kings, the aristocracy. We're talking way back even further than that. Like these claims of what's happened, when they include supernatural things, we really do need more evidence than just a bunch of people say so. Like, really, because we can show you a bunch of people that will absolutely testify and give an affidavit that the angel Moroni came down and talked to Joseph Smith. And they went to their graves. Even after being thrown out of the church, they still, with no reasonable reason to actually keep saying this, they kept saying it to their dying day. So if you want to be intellectually consistent and apply all of this, then you have to apply it across the board. So you have to believe in Christianity, Islam, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Buddhism, Sikhism, Hinduism. You have to apply it to everything, and then you become hopelessly contradictory, because not all of them can be true simultaneously. So we take these supernatural claims, and plus there's the supernatural claims that no one believes anymore. Like Achilles was invulnerable except for his heel kind of thing because he was dipped in the river Styx. Like, nobody believes that anymore. It's just, we have to take these things with a grain of salt. Another sunk cost issue. Yeah, I would agree, Jade. I would agree. And it's good to see you. You've had some really good comments. I appreciate you being here because, I don't know if I've met you before, but hey, you're very welcome. Very good comments. I have liked it. Anyway, I'm going to call it here. That was an episode of Fundamentalist Fails. I'm sorry I got a bit heated in the middle of it. It was just like, somebody just spamming ChatGPT that didn't make any sense in there was kind of annoying. So I apologize. I should have just banned them earlier. I don't know why I give people a chance when they're obviously being so disingenuous. But thank you so much, everybody. Don't forget, I still have to make up my mind whether I am debating, tomorrow night, which is terrible. It should be Saturday morning for Eastern States people, Eastern time people, rather, I should say, US people. But yeah, I'll put out a community post. I don't do enough of them. And I will see you there. If not, I won't see you there, but I think I might. But apart from that, I am doing a debate dissection. I'll get that up as soon as possible on my Sunday morning, Saturday night, US Eastern time. Next week, I will be appearing on the Apostate Sisters, which I am ever so excited about because they are awesome and amazing. And I really like talking to them. So that should be fantastic. I will try and get more debates. Hopefully, the guy in the chat will email to debate me. Somehow, I doubt it. He seems a bit lost without ChatGPT. But yeah. Yeah, no, it's the USA. I won't start on it because I won't stop. But it is. All of us. Oh, we've talked before on Amy's stream. Oh, I love Amy. Amy's amazing. But yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Jade. I didn't remember. I do apologize, but yes. Awesome. Anyway, take care. Don't forget to be kind to yourself. Be kind to each other. And I'll see you in the next one.
This old switchboard could talk. Wow. Your ears would sizzle. 1880. We take Alexander Graham Bell's invention for granted today. Perhaps we should. But isn't it incredible that millions and millions of people can talk simultaneously to practically any spot on Earth?